Hey everyone, welcome back. Things look a little different. I downloaded this sort of bootleg operating system that was built with horror analysis in mind. There is one little quirk about it. The guy that I bought the install disk from said it was haunted and ruined his life and told me to bury it deep enough that it will never kill again. But it's got all these cool tools, like look at this one, Forensic. This guy can help me analyze videos and images, you name it. Anyway, today we're going to be talking about creepypastas. A facet of internet horror that seems like a relic at this point is having a sort of renaissance, especially within the digital horror community. There's something about this bygone genre that is so enticing to contemporary web series creators that more than 20 years since its conception, it's rising again, like a virtual corpse reanimated. But was it ever really gone? Or did it just change its form right under our noses? That's exactly what I intend to discuss today, but first, I'll be going over and analyzing some particularly interesting digital horror series which are directly inspired by the creepypasta of old. Let's get started. Yeah, hold on. I'll go check on that. Let me just run the title sequence. Well, I hope nothing too exciting happened while I was gone. Okay, let's start with Morley Grove.
Slenderman is almost definitely one of the most iconic and well-known creepypasta figures to ever exist. It almost seems pointless to give an introduction, as even his origins feel ubiquitous at this point. Appearing first from the mind of Something Awful user Victor Surge in a 2009 Paranormal Images Photoshop thread, the character essentially derailed the thread as other users became immediately captivated by the concept. We all know him, a tall, faceless figure dressed in a suit and tie appearing from the woods. His intentions and powers vary depending on what version of the character you're looking at, but elements can include stalking his victims to insanity, turning his victims into minions called proxies, kidnapping children, and distorting audio, photo, and video. After the initial post, the Slenderman spread like wildfire, with original stories or images being made, a community building out a larger mythos for the character, and some of the most influential horror web series being inspired by the character, like Marble Hornets and Everyman Hybrid. Not to mention some of the games that shaped much of the indie horror scene today, like Slender the 8 Pages. His character was undeniably a groundbreaking and gripping horror concept, but into the mid-2010s, the Slender clone phenomenon of games wore itself too thin, and other concepts overtook indie horror. And the character's popularity seemed to be a detriment, with 2 feature film attempts garnering very poor reception. By the late 2010s, Slenderman was in the rearview mirror. Horror had moved on. His impacts were still there, but he felt overplayed. What more could anyone do with the character? Fast forward, March 18th, 2022. Remy Abode, creator of one of the most successful analog horror series on YouTube, Gemini Home Entertainment, uploads a video titled Morley Grove. The video begins on a Bandicam screen capture. It's a YouTube video. Judging by the upload date at the bottom and the YouTube layout, this is recorded sometime between 2009 to 2010. The video we're seeing, uploaded by a channel called Super Pilot Jordan, is titled Morley Grove Specters, Missing Kids, Photos Turn Creepy. The description at the bottom reads, "Kids' faces in Morley Grove, Tennessee turn all messed up before disappearances, 1969, proof." The video itself plays ominous piano music as we see a series of photos taken at a picnic or some kind of outdoor family and friend gathering. The video zooms into the faces of some of the children there, and as the description mentions, they seem distorted. It's hard to tell exactly as the photos aren't of great quality, but it certainly looks unsettling. The last photo in the slideshow appears to be nearby a river or lake of some kind. We see another child's face, and then it cuts to something else. But hold on, what were those last few frames? Going back, we can see that it's zoomed into the tree line behind the crowd. At first, it's unclear what we're supposed to be seeing, but look long enough and you'll begin to see a silhouette, a towering figure blending in with the darkness of the trees. This guy looks familiar. The next portion of the video is just a piece of audio, captioned Morley Grove Spectre's audio, recorded February 2007. The haunting sound of children's screams echo into the howling wind, and whoever's recording begins to pick up the pace, running before the entire video ends. Moving on from here, I should probably explain something. The playlist for Morley Grove on Remy Abode's channel has the description archived from Alter 90 pre-deletion, so all of these videos are supposedly re-uploads from a different, presumably older channel who's the one making these screen recordings. Though we can gather some brief snippets of information from this first video, like the fact that some kids went missing in 1969 and this tall figure likely has something to do with it, we're clearly missing some context here. Let's move on to the next video, Birthday 2005. Here, we open to the sound of serene synths as footage of the woods and what appear to be signs of some kind of logging operation. Judging by the quality of the film, this is probably from the 1960s as well. The feeling is odd, a mix of beauty and fear. At the end of the sequence, we see a body of water similar to the one seen in the previous video, and then some footage of children playing. Then we abruptly cut back to a Bandicam screen recording, showcasing a birthday slideshow for someone named Dustin in 2005. In all of the photos, the birthday boy's face is blurred. Not the way the previous images were distorted, this looks like intentional censoring. The final image cuts away before we can get a good look at it, before ending the slideshow. Pausing on that final image, we see it's just a photo of what is presumably Dustin standing in the park with trees around him. There's something hiding within this video though. Right here. Did you see it? I don't blame you, I didn't either. I think missing it is part of the experience. I'll show it again. Pay attention to the left side, around this part of the screen. Did you see it that time? The same figure from the last video, yet again disguised against the tree line. Massive, looming. You can even see its arm move at the end. I completely missed this on my first watch of the video and had to move to the comments to have it pointed out to me. When I saw it, it was literally like that moment from Signs. Insanely good. Going back to the birthday section, an acoustic rendition of You Are My Sunshine plays underneath the slideshow. It creates an oddly unsettling, or at the very least, bittersweet atmosphere. One can't help but think of the lines, "Please don't take my dear sunshine away," when hearing it in this context. And speaking of, the next video, Morley Missing, opens on those exact lines. Please don't take my sunshine away. We see a screen recording of the comments section under that 2005 birthday video. It's a little confusing because of how many layers of re-upload are going on, but judging by the Bandicam logo in the last video, Alter 90 seems to have screen recorded that video, which I think was initially uploaded by XX Face for the Thunder XX 2 years before Alter recorded it. Now, Alter's looking through the comments, and we see a familiar name, Superpilot Jordan, arguing with other commenters about the validity of this so-called Morley Grove Spectres phenomenon. He also says that this child, Dustin, is one of those missing kids. What's even more interesting is the comment by KatraBest17. Is this a joke? All these photos are older than 2005. I'm so confused. And looking back at that slideshow, they're right. They look a lot closer to the quality of the photos we saw in that first Morley Grove video, like they were taken sometime in the 60s. The next portion of the video may help shed a bit of light. The screen recording switches to some kind of web page dedicated to the Morley Grove Spectres, showcasing the names and photos of all the kids who went missing, all dated to 1969. And I'm sorry to interrupt here, but everything has been so atmospheric up to this point, and then I am faced with Judy Moore's face. I don't know, maybe it's scary to some people, but this is the funniest thing I've ever seen. Anyway, among the list of names is Dustin Ford. His photo is missing. A broken link. This suggests not that they didn't have a photo available, but that at some point it was removed or corrupted. The next sequence showcases a series of eyewitness accounts related to the disappearances. My elementary school friend Pammy became a specter. I was staying with my aunt a half hour away, so I wasn't at Morley Grove. My mom was, though. She saw the Morley man. T. Burke. Could this Morley man be the figure we've seen appearing in the background of these videos? I mean, yeah, probably. I knew a guy who said he saw it take one of the kids. He told me it must have been at least 20 feet tall. He said that when it looked at him, it stole a part of his soul. LK. When I was still working, we would get calls from this terrified woman who was convinced that someone was stalking her son. She was absolutely adamant, but couldn't prove any real cause for her suspicion. No matter how hard we searched, nothing came up. I think everyone figured she was just paranoid. I still feel guilty about that. Anonymous. And the final story. I must have been around 12 at the time. I was sitting on the couch right across from Roy. He was a couple years younger than me. I was on the couch that sat against the main wall, so I wasn't able to look out the window. I remember I was showing him this toy truck I had, and for a second he glanced past me, out the window. It took him right then and there. My mom was in the kitchen when it happened. She screamed. Now we're beginning to get a slightly better understanding. These kids are being taken by this Morley man, and he's turning them into specters? It's not entirely clear. It doesn't sound like he's just killing them and then their ghosts are haunting people. It seems like something even more supernatural, that he's taking their souls and turning them into these specters. It's not entirely clear how this works, though. Is he taking them to another plane of existence, removing their bodies so all that's left is their spirits? Is it his way of capturing them? I don't know. Let's keep watching. Our next video, Morley Drive, opens with a date, recorded January 2010. A 911 call. A child explains that there's a man outside his bedroom. While the operator's voice comes through normally, the child is just the sound of distorted crying.
Okay, they're there right now.
The kid's final line is, "If I look at him, he'll take me." We cut to dash cam footage, from the sound of it, inside the squad car going to check on the child. It cuts forward a few times, but there's a strange bit here where it cuts a full minute forward with no visible change on the footage. Odd. We see a satellite view of the house located on Morley Drive, 2:27 a.m. Police arrive at 23 Morley Drive. Holden Dunn, husband, answers the door. Police explain the situation. Dunn is confused, explains that there are no children in the household. The video ends. I have to say, the build-up and twist are incredibly paced here in the original video, and your mind might be immediately wandering to the possibilities. Did the Morley man make this couple forget about their child when he took them? Was it attempting to lure the police there? Let's put a pin in these questions for now and take a look at the next video. Morley Ghost. Morley Ghost consists of one shot from a low-res camera. It records through a doorway into a dark room of a house. First, there's the quiet sound of a child's voice, unintelligible. Then, a cat walks into frame, startled by something in the darkness, before moving on. The camera zooms into the darkness, but it's impossible to make anything out. We sit on this shot for a while, waiting. Then, a shadow passes by, and suddenly the room is filled with darkness. The darkness leaves. And then... This video is by far one of the scariest in the series. It replicates the style of old internet ghost caught on camera screamer videos, and instead of actually using a jump scare, it takes advantage of the expectations we have, and leaves us leaned in and tense the entire way, waiting for something to come out of the darkness in front of us. But it never does. Instead, it leaves us with the panic-inducing sound of footsteps from behind. As for the unintelligible audio, it sounds like it's reversed and stretched. Reversing it back and speeding it up, it's still hard to make out, but it sounds like, "Help me, he's here right now." Spooky. Here is our final video. Birthday 2010. It opens with more 60s home movie footage. A birthday. It's dark out. The song in the background appears to be a reversed version of the song Stars Will Fall by Duster. We cut to a screen recording of a news article from 2010, dated just after the events of Morley Drive. Ghost child scares couple out of home. Morley Grove couple puts house up for sale following ghost 911 call. The photo at the bottom features a sketch of the ghost, but its face is blurred. Cut again. Another birthday slideshow. It seems almost identical to the last aside from the 2010 date, except one thing. Dustin is missing from every single photo. Then it continues. We see the darkened room from Morley Ghost. We get closer and closer. Something's there, but it's nearly impossible to make out. But the blur covering a specific spot tells us what we need to know. Dustin's face is staring at us from the darkness. The only time we see Dustin clearly is the opening photo and this ending photo. But even that seems different. Comparing the first slideshow to this one, Dustin's portrait in the new one feels so off. His posture is stiff, his face looks purple and red. He looks more like a corpse that's been taxidermied than a living child. There's one more detail here. Dustin isn't the only thing missing from these photos. Take a look at the two versions of the park photo. One of the trees is missing. Seems like it was never a tree at all. And if you look closely at the first photo, it does stand out, like it's been blurred by the same filter that's blurring Dustin's face. For now though, that's all the videos. Remy's latest upload does suggest the series will continue, but exactly when, we don't know yet. So let's see what we can figure out with what we have.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Let me open the analysis section.
This isn't the longest series, so I probably won't have a ton to analyze, but I do think there are a few interesting connections to be made, and I think I can posit some answers to some of our questions. To start, let's get a basic rundown of what happened.
1969. At least 5 kids, probably more, mysteriously go missing in Morley Grove, Tennessee. Nobody knows where they went, but a sort of conspiracy pops up that these kids have been turned into specters. It's not entirely clear what that means, but we can gather they're some kind of ghostly apparitions, their voices heard echoing in the wind or quietly in the silences that fill homes, even decades after their disappearances. After they've disappeared, something else happens. Their faces become distorted and strange in photographs. Something else that's fairly clear is that these disappearances are likely caused by the Morley Man, the name this series has for the Slender Man type figure we've been seeing, a towering, faceless entity who hides among the trees. The specifics of this entity aren't fleshed out as of yet, but we know he's at least 20 feet tall. Eyewitnesses have seen him take children without even touching them, and he has a certain effect on people when encountered. One witness described it as stealing a part of their soul. The channel Super Pilot Jordan appears to be dedicated to uncovering the mysteries of and documenting information surrounding the Morley Grove specters, and this channel likely isn't the only person doing so, as we also see a website aimed at the same thing.
There are a few other elements that the series introduces that aren't quite as straightforward. To start, we have Dustin.
One of the Morley Grove kids who went missing in 1969, it becomes pretty apparent something is different about his case. In all of his appearances, his face has been blurred out, intentionally censoring it. Why? We don't see this with the other distorted faces, and his entry on the website contains a missing image file. It's like his identity is being removed. Even stranger, despite his disappearance in 1969, we keep seeing these 2000s era slideshows posting the same images from his birthday in the 60s, but labeled with increasing dates. 2005, 2010. These recurring birthday celebration videos, decades after his death. The other strange element in this series is the events of Morley Drive.
What happened with this phone call, with this ghost child? I want to start here.
So, in 2010, the police get a call from a house, a child telling them a man is outside. When they arrive on the scene, the couple who lives at the house explain there are no children in the home. My first thought stayed within the themes of erasing identities we've seen so far, that the couple did have a child, but when the Morley Man took him, he erased all memories of him. It's compelling, but it doesn't have a ton of supporting evidence. For pretty much every other case, there are people who still remember the kids, with some even witnessing them being taken. The only real exception is Dustin, who we see disappearing from photos in the 2010 video. And though the 2010 date does line up with the phone call, all other evidence points to Dustin going missing in 1969, decades before this phone call. So my next thought was that the Morley Man was using one of his victims' voices as a sort of lure, but his intentions of doing so, seeing as nothing really happened afterwards, wouldn't be entirely clear.
Instead of either of these explanations, I want to posit another one that I think can help explain Dustin as well.
I think Dustin is trying to escape the Morley man. I think this 2010 phone call is Dustin calling for help from wherever he is as a specter. And I think because of that, the Morley man is punishing him. Dustin is slowly being erased, first through blurring his identity, then by removing him altogether. And when we do see him in the 2010 video, he appears to be in a far worse state than the 5 years prior. The 2010 video marks the Morley man's punishment for Dustin's 2010 attempt at escape, further distorting and erasing him. We could then assume that the 2005 video and the blurring of his features and removal of his photo from the website marked a punishment for a previous attempt at escape, taking a loving memorial of Dustin's last birthday and twisting it, blurring his face in the photos. The Morley man's punishment for those who don't want to be forgotten is to erase them further. We then might assume the Morley ghost video is Dustin's 2005 attempt, calling out, "Help me, he's here right now." And it is possible. Though I can't verify this, one comment on the Morley ghost video says it used to be titled Morley Drive 2 before it was changed, indicating a sort of thematic connection. But to me, it feels more like another piece of footage from around the same time as the 2010 instance. Perhaps a recording from the newly paranoid couple who eventually moved out of the house. Chronologically, this would make sense, as the phone call puts the Morley man outside the home, and Morley ghost seems to suggest he's made his way in. My current thought about Dustin inhabiting the Morley Drive home is that it may have been where he lived decades previously, before his disappearance, but that is more of a gut feeling than anything concrete.
All of this begs the question, who is the Morley man? What are his intentions? Where did he come from? And is he still around?
I'm not sure we have all the answers to these questions yet, but I have an idea as to where he came from. We don't know a lot about the Morley man, but we've consistently seen him as a figure associated with the woods, blending in among the trunks, silhouetted against the branches. And knowing his close inspiration to the Slender Man character, we can safely assume this character is deeply connected to the forest. Going back to the birthday 2005 video, what is it that we see in the beginning? Home video footage of a logging operation. And not only do we see the Morley man among the trees here, but multiple times if we assume the images in the first video are close by. Now, I'm not sure this is like the Morley man is a forest spirit angered by the destruction of nature, but my current pet theory is that this logging operation encroached on his neck of the woods and sort of awakened the beast. Otherwise, I don't have a lot of new information to bring to the table. Clearly, he has a supernatural ability to disappear children and seems to have some abilities relating to erasing people, or at the very least, the memories of these people. But I think this is where the themes of Morley Grove really begin to stand out. In a more thematic sense, I think the Morley man really represents death and time, and what it does to people who've passed and those who remember them. After these kids go missing, their faces become less clear, blurry and distorted, like the fuzzy memories of a face you can't quite conjure together in your head. Their voices just distant sounds. Even on the supposedly permanent internet, their photos are low quality or eventually succumb to internet rot as domains and media fail to be kept up. With a symbolic lens, we can understand these as parallels as they relate to the old adage of dying twice. First, when you take your last breath, and second, when your name is spoken for the last time. Once someone has passed, they exist only in the memories of those who knew them. But these memories are imperfect and will inevitably fade, their face less clear, their voice muffled by the growing decades since it was last heard. And maybe this is what the specters are, a manifestation of the collective memories of those who've gone missing, as nothing else is left. Maybe this is why we see the recurring theme of people like Super Pilot Jordan obsessively documenting the case, or the repeating use of Dustin's birthday. The date keeps coming and going, and someone is trying desperately to keep his memory alive. He's trying to keep his memory alive, but with the passing of time, Dustin's presence is disappearing. And I think that's why the Morley man seems to be punishing Dustin for trying to escape. It's just against the nature of death. Everyone, eventually, is destined to fade. faces forgotten, voices unrecalled, to disappear.
Listen, I don't know what, but I think something in these woods is following me. And I think if I look at it, something terrible is gonna happen.
Click here for an incredible deal. Patreon.com/SaganHawks. Behind the scenes, exclusive reviews, commentary tracks, Q&As, and more. And it's only $2. That was weird. But Morley Grove sure was something, huh? It's so interesting seeing this renewed interest in old creepypasta. But I bet we can get older. Back to the earliest days of the internet, AIM messages and Hotmail accounts, and a phenomenon that would be the building blocks for the creepypasta genre, chainmail. Emails and instant messages which would implore the reader to forward it to 5 friends, 10 friends, 50. And though their tactics varied, one of the most successful was that of the scary story and the threat of death.
Halt! It is I, the Wizard. If you are reading or listening to this message, you are hereby granted immunity from all chain letters incognito hazards, virtual or otherwise, contained within this video, and henceforth and hereafter and so forth. Be well, be blessed, and be gone!
These stories would begin by warning the receiver to continue reading and not stop for any reason. It would then go on to lay out a horrific story of murder or a tragic accident. And finally, the message ends claiming that if you don't forward the message to X amount of people, the ghost of the victim of whatever horrific incident you've just read about will come to kill you. Details varied to some extent, but that was a fairly popular format. A horror story ending by threatening a horrific death if you don't pass it along. And as one person who receives the message spreads it to 5, and those 5 spread it to 5 more, I'm sure you can see how it became so ubiquitous. And the stories written in these chain letters are one of the key components that led to the emergence of early creepypasta, which I will discuss in a lot more depth later, which explains why one of the earliest creepypasta to really blow up was based on one of them. Smile.jpg, aka Smile Dog, is a story I'm sure you've at least heard of. It's a story about an image of a smiling dog with the file name smile.jpg, which, if seen, will inflict paranormal torment to the viewer, and eventually death if the photo isn't shared. Something about Smile Dog that's really interesting is that the story isn't the curse, the image is. This led to that image becoming more widespread than the actual story, which is a fairly common occurrence with creepypastas that have images associated with them. Take Jeff the Killer as an example. And if you want to talk about modern interest in old creepypasta, Jeff the Killer is like the current nexus point. There's a search, a bounty with thousands of dollars on the line going on right now, trying to find the original, unphotoshopped version of this iconic image. The origins of so many of these photos associated with old creepypastas are lost because of the time they were created, a less archived internet, decades old at this point. And that's kind of where our next series comes in.
ChainmailChasers is a series following the exact type of investigators who go looking for the origins of these creepypasta images. The description of the ChainmailChasers channel reads, "A channel dedicated to finding the origins of popular internet horror images, notably from creepypastas. Videos attempt to emulate a faux movie maker style." Sounds cool. Let's take a look at the first few videos. The first video is a bit of a softball. It starts with a familiar face, or I guess, lack thereof. Slenderman, and the photos that Victor Surge created along with the original stories. Though there's no voiceover, we are guided along via text on screen as the uploader shows us some of the archival origins she was able to track down. There's not too much in the way of plot relevance in this episode, as it mostly functions as an introduction, but one thing that's worth noting is this series does take place in a sort of alternate universe from our own, meaning the origins of these images that the channel uncovers aren't always accurate. Very often they aren't. That's kind of the series' whole thing. I wanted to say that at the outset because these videos have accidentally tricked quite a few people who just stumbled across them, including lost media channels like Blame It on Jorge. Anyway, on to the next video. The next video, focusing in on the highly elusive Jeff the Killer origins, follows largely the same formula, taking us back to the very earliest examples of the image being associated with the Jeff the Killer name, and then even farther back to its earliest appearances on 4chan and Japanese message boards, where other versions of the Photoshop are found. The video is only 3 minutes long, as the actual origins still remain elusive. It promises the Smile Dog image as the topic of the next video, and that's exactly what we find. The video begins by addressing a popular Smile Dog image, which, although popular, isn't the one that is primarily associated with the Smile Dog story. After quickly showcasing the original elements used to Photoshop this image together, we move to the actual Smile Dog photo. This one is a little more difficult to track down, but using the reverse image search tool TinEye garners an interesting result. Seemingly a variant of this Smile Dog image, this time more compressed and red, hosted on a site called Paranormal Prickheads from 2007, predating the original creepypasta. The video then changes to a screen recording of the host of the channel, Grace, and we actually hear her talking instead of just text.
Okay, so I put that, like this is just an update. I put that one website into the Wayback Machine, and I got this. This thing is fucking old.
She's on the Wayback Machine archive of the Paranormal Prickheads website, a clearly dated website dedicated to paranormal phenomena. In a section under chain letters, the website details one called Smile, an old chain letter reminiscent of the one detailed in the Smile Dog creepypasta, but not exactly the same. And the image associated with it is this newly discovered, though older chronologically, red variant of the Smile Dog image. Supposedly, this chain letter can be traced all the way back to the 90s on Usenet, much earlier than the 2008 date associated with the creepypasta.
And then he says the image looks like shit, which, I mean, this weird ass image does. Like, I guess this is supposed to be like JPEG loss, but you cannot make an image that bad that way. That's fucking nasty.
That note about the JPEG loss will be important later. Let's put a pin in that.
Yeah, like, I guess if you guys can find anything, like the 8 of you, I guess tell me. Yeah. No, like, fuck. Right, where did I? Where'd I? Oh, okay. Oh, shit.
And with sex origins, it ends. The next video is an update, with Grace having received some emails with possible leads, this video covering one. A series of spam emails from someone called Grin Friend. Their emails all have a recurring smile theme, and attach another new variant of the Smile Dog image, this time darker and more reminiscent of a skull. The image's file name leads Grace to an archived Something Awful thread from 2002, where a user called Grinning Ghoulie spammed the very same image incredibly quickly, only briefly interrupted by annoyed users like Googly Moogly. The final image in the thread is another very slight variation, this time looking nearly identical to the darker image but with a more prominent face and smile. Grace downloads the photo, simply titled smile.jpg, and ends the video. Can't imagine downloading a horrific image with the same name of a supposedly cursed file that will inflict torment on its viewer will lead to anything bad. You may notice though, something strange happens right at the end. What is this goo? The next video follows up with the other lead, an email from someone else who appears to be genuinely interested in helping with the search. Arthur Murphy, aka Koi Koi. He explains that he has a similar interest in tracking these sorts of things down, especially smile.jpg, which really hits close to home. So, Grace hops on a Discord call. Strangely, Koi Koi begins the call asking for Grace to suspend her disbelief for the duration of the call, because what he's going to show her may seem unbelievable.
Can you just suspend your disbelief? Like, you're like everything, just suspend it, at least for the duration of this call.
I mean, okay, but I thought you were gonna just show me,
Okay. If you leave this call thinking that I am fucking with you, you have every right on earth to never talk to me again, okay?
First, he points out the goo at the end of the last video, and Grace attempts to come up with a rational explanation.
Kinda fucking weird. Looks kind of like mold or whatever, but what I think happened here is you can see that it's in line with the image or whatever. Above it, you have like all the other small ones, and this kind of looks like curtains or something.
Then, Koi Koi explicitly asks for the screen share to be stopped and for Grace to open smile.jpg multiple times.
Can you actually turn off the screen share real fast? Can you know the Smile Dog image? Like, you downloaded it?
Yeah, yeah.
Can you open it up a few times?
Like, you want me to screen share it, or?
No. Can you just open it up a few times on your own?
Before she can, though, it seems like she realizes she's late for something and has to end things abruptly. When Grace comes back, now alone, she tries doing what Koi Koi asked. And when she does, things start changing.
I don't understand why. What the fuck? I'm not talking to a JPEG.
A sort of conversation plays out between her and the image, in which the image responds before Grace can even finish talking, almost as if it can read her thoughts.
Did you, how the fuck I didn't know what I was thinking?
Per the image's request, she changes the image to a .gif file, and things really take a turn. I'll give a brief rundown of what the image seems to be saying.
It feels good to be used again. In presence, I am not the source. I am a thinking curse. I transmit my spores through neurons. Digital and the flesh.
How the fuck I didn't know what I was thinking?
Refer to the previous. Your brain stores images too.
Oh, hell no. Fuck that. Fuck that.
Grace comes back via text, informing us that ever since then, she's been experiencing an intense migraine, just as is one of the symptoms in the original creepypasta. And more horrifically, her computer is intermittently turning on and laughing in the night. Grace announces a break from the videos and that Arthur, aka Koi Koi, requested that certain images from here on out be censored from the videos. So, we've got a flat-out paranormal image. We'll get a bit more into exactly the nature of this thinking curse as things progress, but I think it's interesting to note Arthur's behavior so far. Not only does he appear to have some history with this whole smile dog thing, he also appears to have some understanding of how it works. He knows that viewing it can lead to negative consequences, which is why he requested for future images to be censored and for Grace to stop the screen share before she opened the image. The question then is, how much does he know? And why didn't he try harder to warn Grace? Did he just not think she would believe it? And there's one more strange detail in this video. When we're able to get a clear view of Grace's desktop, the date says 2019, but this video was uploaded 2022. Are these old recordings? Well, not as far as I can tell. It seems that though these are technically uploaded more recently, this series is supposed to take place in 2019, which I do have some possible reasons for, but I won't be able to get into them until a little later. For now, let's just keep watching. The next video is a bit of a return to normalcy, a video covering the origins of iconic images associated with the Rake creepypasta. This time though, we have narration from someone new.
Hey Chainmail Chasers, Davey here, welcome back to the channel. And yeah, I'm a new guy, so don't be alarmed. My friend's been having some computer issues lately, so I'm helping out.
Aside from some interesting facts about the origins of some photos and this mention of the classic Fallen Angel video, this video would be unnoteworthy, if not for a few strange glitches.
Read the title. That concludes our investigation into the origins of the Rake.
And the very next video addresses these weird hiccups. Another entry into the Smile Dog saga. Grace is screen recording again, on a call with Davey and Arthur. Clearly frazzled and stressed, she shows the other two glitches she noticed. Mainly, a darkened face that looks like Smile Dog, and a horrifying humanoid face that's smiling as well.
Okay, what the...
Yeah!
What
You
is that?
see! Like,
I see that. Is that a face?
What the fuck? Wait, so that was from the video, like, Darken or whatever?
look, this thing's a fucking ghoul.
The group seems tense, like each one is unsure of what to think of the others. Grace especially unsure if one of them is just fucking with her.
I just wanted to show you why I've been so frustrated these past few days. Like, I don't know if you're just trying to mess with me. I know that's not really your deal, but I just...
Yeah, what the fuck, dude?
Who are you talking to?
Either way, it appears these images were added to the video between the final export and when the video was uploaded to YouTube. Meanwhile, the Smile Dog entity in Grace's computer still seems to be on their minds as the cause of this whole thing.
Like, because as far as I'm concerned, the fucking JPEG I opened is threatening me.
Man, I kind of want to provoke it, but
Okay,
at the
so
same
I'm
time,
cutting the...
Arthur seems to have some history with this kind of thing, but again only speaks on it in vague terms.
Well, I do think that I know that there is something going on here. Like
Okay.
I've put up with similar bullshit as you, like, in the past.
They decide to try isolating the file into a virtual machine, hoping to quarantine it.
You brought up like a virtual machine earlier.
Yeah. Yeah, you could just do that.
Would I literally just be able to put the picture of the dog inside there?
There are a couple other details in this video I'd like to point out. During one of the visual glitches, a date can be seen, May 31st, 2020 something. Not only do they note this date as being in the future, cementing the idea this series is pre-2020,
May 31st, 2020 something. Like, what does that mean? What is that supposed to tell me?
The future?
but this specific date does have some relevancy to a theory of mine later on, so we'll come back to that. Also, the description Grace has for the humanoid face.
Like, look, this thing's a fucking ghoul.
I am immediately reminded of the grinning ghoulie user from the Something Awful thread a few videos ago. Moving along. The next video has Davey narrating again, this time covering the origins of an image associated with the Mario Creepypasta ROM. The exact specifics of the creepypasta aren't entirely important, other than that it ends up describing a gruesome murder scene and showcasing this image. Its origins are revealed to be associated with an ARG claiming the image had supernatural consequences for those who viewed it. But as the Chainmail Chasers continued their research, it led them to a YouTube video by the channel Ice Cream Monkey Fan titled Weird Chain Letter Victim 1 from 2007, a Windows Movie Maker edited video where Ice Cream Monkey Fan explains he's receiving chain emails from someone called Grinfiend. That name's familiar. Some of the emails are forwarded from years back and continue the running theme we've seen so far, imploring the reader to smile, though they differ by including the image from the Mario creepypasta as well as the description of the murder scene, implying these letters are the true origins that would later be repurposed for the Mario creepypasta ROM. What's especially interesting is that some of these messages also use a variation of the smile dog image, and the ghoul face first seen in the Rake video. It's like no matter what, it all comes back to chainmail, which I guess is why the series is called that, but still, the video ends in a strange fashion. Though we might be tempted to go looking for the Ice Cream Monkey Fan channel to see what else is revealed there, no such channel exists. At least not yet. For now, after a brief update in which Grace announces a Discord for the followers of the channel, our next big update is with Smile Dog Origins, Interrogation. The video opens by explaining the recording is actually from a few months ago. After this interview was recorded, she tried to just stay silent and leave it alone, but it's not going away. Now, this goes for the last interview too, but I think these are way more entertaining to see for yourself in real time. It's genuinely a really impressive feat to pull off the effects and back and forth that happens in these videos. So instead of just playing the whole thing all the way through, I'll play a little bit of it and then just give a rundown of some important reveals we get during this interrogation.
For the viewers at home, I put this thing into a virtual machine and locked down file transfer, and my goal here is to try and ask the thing some questions. I mean, I figured I have to have some sort of leverage over it because it's a fucking demon. Jesus Christ. I'll just cut straight to the point so we can both get this over with. Is there any way I can get you out of my head? Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ. Stop. Stop.
So clearly this thing has more power than the Chainmail Chasers thought. Something important to note about that clip though, is that the Smile Dog entity seems to reference the Paranormal Prickheads website, saying they had better security. Later on in the conversation, in reference to Koi Koi / Arthur, the entity says, trying to draw doubt around Arthur's ability to help and perhaps his trustworthiness. The entity ends the conversation by giving Grace the topic for her next video, a seemingly more demonic variant of the Smile Dog image, then says, another reference to Arthur. So, the image entity is not only attempting to sow distrust within the group, but also seemingly create a sense of connection between Grace and itself, portray itself as helpful. On top of that, it seems that both Arthur's role and that of the briefly seen Paranormal Prickheads website will be of increasing significance as the series goes on. Davy's back to give us an update on the Jeff the Killer image search, helped along by the image entity's lead at the end of the last video. Reverse searching that demon dog face led them back to the Paranormal Prickheads website, specifically a page for entities called solar plexus clown gliders, which are yet another form of cognitohazard, or a supernaturally harmful piece of image or sound. In this case, this version of the solar plexus clown glider has its origins as a variant from the Smile chain letters, according to the Paranormal Prickheads. The page also includes some other similar but different face images. The face that's really important, though, is the version supposedly taken and repurposed for a series of shock images called Pretty Face. This Pretty Face page leads them to yet another image used in this series of shock images. It appears to be an earlier version of the Jeff the Killer Photoshop. It's corrupted, but still an interesting find in the way of the Jeff the Killer image origins, in the world of Chainmail Chasers at least. Davey ends by announcing the next video's topic.
The next episode will cover a working timeline of the smile.jpg image over the years, as best as we can approximate from the given information, accompanied by some theories about what exactly is going on. We'll see you then.
So, we may get some more answers into how these all connect. Clearly, the themes of supernatural images and smiling faces, all with slight variations, feel connected. But before we move on, it's worth noting right after this, a new channel appears. Ice Cream Monkey Fan re-uploads, featuring the Weird Chain Letter Victim 1 video and a Mario YouTube poop. We don't really need to go over these at this point, but we should be keeping an eye on this channel. This is one of the longer videos, and for good reason. Davey goes through all of the images we've seen so far, and creates a sort of chain of evolution, positing that all of these images came from the same source. The exact order isn't super important for our analysis, except for the fact that the image entity in Grace's computer seems to take the form of some of the earliest variants, and that there are likely even earlier versions yet to be discovered. Otherwise, the important thing to note that all of these images, from the Mario image to Jeff the Killer, all stem from the same source, these early cognitohazard smile images. And even more interestingly, as these images change via some force we don't understand, they begin to separate into new entities.
As these images are spread, whatever force that animates them causes natural image loss in different contexts to sort of mutate them, evolving into different images and manifesting different entities. That's why the known image entity can only assume forms that are relatively close to itself. Why early pictures are more similar to an actual dog, while later on they become more abstract and monstrous. In questions, the image entity describes spreading itself in an analogy of self-reproduction outright. This hypothesis has even more credence when you compare the images. The second solar plexus image, compared to the first, is clearly very similar. The site claims it was just updated to that appearance, but you can tell that whatever happened is no mere Photoshop edit. Same teeth structure, same head tilt, same ominous digits creeping from behind. But some things change. Eyes and teeth are hazy and undetailed, as if mid-metamorphosis.
As these entities spread, they change and branch, and once they've evolved enough, they become their own entities, separate from their predecessors. This evolution seems to explain the hazy and almost painted look some of the images have, something that Grace pointed out all the way back in the first Smile Dog video. And according to Davey, these evolutions can become disambiguated enough from their source, likely with the help of individuals making Photoshop edits that interfere with their natural evolution, that much further evolved variants like the Jeff the Killer or the modern Smile Dog have lost their supernatural power. Or, as he says,
we're starting to get into the modern era now, where most of the images have been completely sterilized.
There's another element to this video that I've skipped over thus far for clarity's sake. Throughout it, Davy is interrupted by seemingly covert recordings from Grace's webcam, likely the doing of the Smile Dog image entity. First, we see Grace talking with Arthur.
But you've experienced this before, right? So you should know a thing or two about what I'm dealing with. And sorry, go ahead.
Then we see Grace as the entity speaks to her, the clip ending with a level of interaction from the entity so far unseen. For one, the hand we see appear behind Grace's head seems to be a direct parallel to the hands that appear throughout the Smile Dog image variants, something present in the actual real-world Smile Dog images too. And as the hand reaches for her, her face becomes distorted in a way that looks almost painterly, in a similar style to these evolving images. The final clip from Grace shows her running to the bathroom and coughing up what appears to be blood. Things are getting bad. The video ends with Davy signing off for now, and an end to Season 1 of Chainmail Chasers. That's not the end though. Not even close. Firstly, Ice Cream Monkey Fan's Reuploads channel would continue uploading not long after Season 1 wrapped, starting with a video called Der Grossman Sightings. The video by Ice Cream Monkey Fan details a mysterious ancient creature from Germany called Der Grossman. For those of you a little more informed on the Slender lore, you'll know the name Der Grossman roughly translates to the Tall Man, and is one of the supposedly ancient names the Slender Man was known by, along with Der Ritter, meaning the Knight. The video showcases some sketches of a Slender Man-like creature, though it appears a lot more like the old Der Ritter Photoshop from Slender lore than the modern Slender Man appearance we're accustomed to. More medieval in style. One thing of particular note that Ice Cream Monkey Fan says is some people think it's an angel and fights basilisks. Sort of an odd thing to say, but we'll come back to it. The most intriguing part of this video is when he reveals that users on the Paranormal Prickheads website have reported seeing him. What follows are a series of photos that are so compressed and hard to make out that you'd be forgiven for not seeing anything at all. But supposedly, Der Grossman is hiding within these frames. What looks like a chimney here really being the creature's head. This vague shape supposedly its form. Perhaps its spindly legs creeping out of the fog? Ice Cream Monkey Fan also notes that some of those being stalked have had their computers wiped. Strange. The final couple images are then affected by some distortion, and like the other visual glitches we've seen so far, this wasn't done in post. Seemingly, this has affected the YouTube upload itself, as even the overlaid text is caught in the damaged data. The final shot showcases what is supposedly the clearest shot of the creature, and even through the jittering pixels, we can get a good look at this thing's face, or lack thereof. The video finally ends with a bout of video corruption, and the words, "the user who sent this never," being barely legible for a few frames. The final video on Ice Cream Monkey Fan's channel that we'll cover before we get into the meat of this Paranormal Prickheads business is called Heaven Stairway Incident in May 2021, Truth Unveiled. This video has kind of a funny origin. The creator behind this whole Chainmail Chasers web series, Ebola Granola, is also the person behind the Heaven Stairway Incident troll science comic meme. You know the classic oil floats in water, human flying comic? This was sort of a twist on that. Oil floats in water. Human skin is already oily.
May 2021, New York City Heaven Stairway Incident.
As far as I can tell, this really was just a meme at the time, but this video is sort of incorporating that into the lore of the series. What Ice Cream Monkey Fan has to say is strange, jarring. People call it the rapture, where God takes all the good people into heaven before the end of the world. I'm a time traveler. I can't remember how because I was too little, but I have pictures from my friend. On May 28th, a big thunderstorm will come to New York City, and it lifts everyone into the sky with a big glowing spot. Some people will fall back down when the rain stops, and their faces are all fucked up and grinning. I think something stopped them from going to heaven. My friend says that they may have been alive if they didn't hit the ground. There was a plane when it happened. A girl said she saw something out the window, so she drew it. Is that the goddamn troll face? Believe it or not, this does have some importance later, including what Ice Cream Monkey Fan follows up with immediately after. Possible basilisk in New York? The basilisk made them grin. The basilisk kept them from heaven. The end is coming. I do apologize for reading so much verbatim. I try not to do that as much. I don't just want to be the recap guy, but there's so much exposition here, it's just clearest that way. He ends the video explaining his role in all of this. My friend says we were all outside when it happened again later on. And then all of a sudden, we were back in time in 2001. I don't know where we are. It's really dark and we don't need to eat. I miss ice cream. But we can talk to you guys. It only starts in New York City. It goes everywhere else it rains after. Finally, the ending credits the bad pictures to my grin friend. So that's a lot to take in. For now, aside from this incoming rapture, the thing I want you to focus on most is actually the more personal side. Ice Cream Monkey Fan is in some sort of dark limbo, communicating with us somehow, and is accompanied by his friend. Grin Friend, perhaps? The same Grin Friend we've seen throughout the series that sent the entity to Grace in the first place? Or maybe a different variant? I will try my best to make sense of all of this later, but for now, we need to keep this information in the back of our minds as we head back to the Chainmail Chasers channel. Firstly, there's something I haven't mentioned yet. Not long after the season finale, it seems that the Smile Dog image entity infecting Grace's computer took over the channel. Looking at the community tab, posts presumably made by the entity can be seen cryptically teasing the future and even posting about Ice Cream Monkey Fan's uploads. But around the time of this Heaven's Stairway video, the entity seems to clear some of the air. That the basilisk referenced in that video is not it. It goes even so far to call that one a runt.
A minor example in itself. I am powerful.
Also worth noting, it declares,
I am not the one reviving these records. I simply let it happen.
Meaning there are other people at work when it comes to re-uploading Ice Cream Monkey Fan's videos, and as we'll soon see, other records, which is what I think we should get into now. The latest video on the Chainmail Chasers channel is titled ParanormalPrickheads.com Web Ad 2008, an archived advertisement for the website we've been seeing throughout the series, and the description contains a link to a now up and running archive of the website itself. Narrated by the webmaster of the site, Aaron, we're finally introduced to it properly.
Hey, are you interested in the paranormal and unexplained? Do you like dissecting strange hoaxes and obscure horror? ParanormalPrickheads.com is right for you. Hi, I'm Aaron. I'm the webmaster of the page. It started back in 2002 as a small personal blog on the supernatural, but quickly expanded into something much bigger. 3 years back, we added a forum section and overhauled the website, which greatly expanded our ever-vibrant community. Our 4 administrators keep things clean and orderly, both for discussion and our many articles. Have an interesting personal story? Seen anything peculiar on other forums? Let us know. We have a variety of mega threads for personal stories and citing accounts. Even odd things found on the web are fair game to share in the forums.
But it wouldn't be a Chainmail Chasers video without a little interruption from our friend Smile Dog. The entity chimes in essentially to encourage us to dig deeper into the site, to find all that's hidden there. Also to imply something terrible happened to the people behind the site, which we were already semi-aware of from the Der Grossman video. Either way, the most exciting thing is the reveal of the next phase of our investigation, the Paranormal Prickheads website, back from the dead, and now accessible to us. There is a lot to this website. Though the homepage states it's an incomplete archive, a lot of the pages are up and running, and we can access a variety of them through the many subcategories of anomalies on the site. There are also a good number of secrets here, but I want to wait to dive into them until after we've done a decent overview of the surface level stuff. I won't be going over all the pages here in detail, but I will be touching on the most important ones, and I definitely encourage you to look over the stuff I don't cover here, because it's all great world building, and you may make some connections that I didn't. On the most basic level, what you'll notice about all of these pages is a mythos that draws heavily from Abrahamic religions and the occult. Ghosts, cryptids, angels, demons, and speaking of, that's where we're going to start. Demons. The initial demon page describes a standard demon as a being unable to take physical form, instead influencing humans psychologically, driving them to sin and occasionally even possessing them. Entities born from negative emotions like misery and malice, tragedy, and most ominously, that their incorporeal forms will become more and more clear in the lead up to the end of days, until they become completely tangible due to the mass degradation of the greater human psyche. End of days, you say? That reminds me of something we've seen. Getting more specific to different types of demons, the site has pages for basilisks and fallen angels. Finally, we can get a little more light shed on these concepts. Basilisks are demons that can only interact with the physical world through creative expression, said to kill or torment anyone that understands them. Yeah, this seems about right. It sounds like these image entities we've been seeing are basilisks. They even directly reference them as the origins of the modern mimetic hazard concepts. But there's even more context on this page too. Initially, there was the idea that sigils tied to demons that became basilisks would inherit their deathly properties. It was of great frustration that creating such sigils was nigh impossible without clairvoyance, as it had to represent a tragedy associated with the basilisk. Obviously, you can't really know a basilisk caused any specific tragedy without suffering its effect. The real basilisk was in the sigil itself, and once made could recreate itself inside the summoner's mind or elsewhere should it be given a medium. So, these basilisk image entities we've been seeing are not only ancient, but also directly linked with a tragedy associated with them. The image itself is sort of the vessel the entity propagates and interacts through. We also begin to learn about the relationship between basilisks and angels via both the basilisk page and the fallen angels page. Angels and basilisks have a storied history, mostly myths telling of angels coming down to slay basilisks, similar to stories of knights slaying dragons. Fallen angels are said to spread basilisks willingly, implanting them in the minds of humans to let them grow, so that they can reap their crop. In either case, a human infected with a basilisk likely won't survive if an angel is after that basilisk. But the final important point surrounding basilisks comes down to their origins. Given the roots of the entities, it was believed the most powerful basilisks would come from the end of days and sin of creation respectively, both invoking notions of the beast. One basilisk sigil from a tragedy related to the beast is claimed to exist, though what event it represents is deliberately left vague. Okay, so what about the beast? What is thought to be an ancient, twisted angel that devours itself constantly, ever growing. The core of hell. The beast was originally an angel of high importance who fell to hell after its gluttonous appetite for information led it to eat fruit from the tree of knowledge. Its nature became of information that sought to consume information, so it began devouring itself. The beast was said to be the first demon, as its constant self-mutilation and horrific existence deteriorated it into an unrecognizable red mass. As the beast represents the tragedy of creation, Revelations prophesizes that it will bring about the end of days as well. It is said that when mankind is riddled by sadness and ill deeds, that basilisks will begin flooding into the minds of mankind. This will continue until the state of the world is so polluted that hell will become corporeal. Various basilisks will cause their own tragedies and strengthen themselves in this time. One believed sect claims that the beast has actually been usurped by a being known as the bisected king, while others vehemently deny this. So, as the name might imply, the beast is like the devil, the entity at the core of sin and tragedy, and the origin point of demons and basilisks. So what about this bisected king then? A recent belief that a man caught between the immaterial and physical worlds will come to lose himself and usurp the beast. That the beast will be usurped in hell at some point before the end of days. The human half is not fully aware of the influence of the demonic half though. Some prophecy is interpreted as implying that the king is currently alive and split anywhere between the 1980s and present day. Early writings mention convoluted descriptions of shifts in time rippling out due to the approaching end of days, allowing a mad boy to occasionally slip into the world of hell. Shifts in time, a mad boy split between the material and immaterial worlds with demonic influence tied to the end of days, sounds a lot like someone we know. But we'll return to that. We're nearly at the end of the main pages that are relevant to us. The cryptids category has entries for two entities, Indrid Cold and the Hat Man, two different mysterious figures, one in a red suit and the other in a wide-brimmed hat and coat. Both are mostly benevolent, or at least neutral, but Indrid Cold is said to appear just before tragedy strikes, and the Hat Man often warns of an incoming apocalypse. Finally, on the cryptids tab, we have an entry for Der Grossman. Clicking on it, it's completely corrupted. The image distorted and the text illegibly glitched. And this is where we're going to need to start looking a little deeper than the surface. To start, let's look at the bottom of these pages. Last edited by Webmaster A. Clicking on the name, we can find the bios of the main administrators behind the site. Webmaster Aaron, Will, Quasi-Phantom, and Googly Moogly. If that name sounds familiar, it's because we heard it all the way back near the beginning of the series. It was one of the two other people in the Something Awful thread that the Smile Dog image was initially spammed on. Now, with a little more context of who's running the site, let's take a look at the source code. Scattered throughout these pages are bits and pieces of conversation the admins are having on the back end. Some of it is just technicalities of the site or friends goofing off, but many of these messages begin to spell something more grim. The paranormal prickheads were also afflicted with this image entity, possibly more than one. We can also glean what are more than likely the names of Quasi-Phantom and Googly Moogly. Quasi-Phantom being Rebecca, and Googly Moogly being Murph. Wait, as in Arthur Murphy? Koi Koi? Maybe. Note this particular interaction. Delete your local archive immediately, Murphy. Do not give it even a little more food. Remember, we're all done for, but you still have a little brother. Well, we know fallen angels will come after humans who've been infected by basilisks, and we know that the paranormal prickheads were being afflicted by this image entity basilisk, as well as being stalked by Der Grossman, who Ice Cream Monkey Fan describes as a fallen angel. And if basilisks are entities of memory, it would make sense then that the angels consume those memories when they reap their crop. We even hear from Ice Cream Monkey Fan that their hard drives are being wiped. And this seems to come to a head with this note from the source code. People have died and we can't remember who. And if you need any more evidence of the paranormal prickhead's predicament, it's spelled out pretty directly in the source code of the Pretty Face page. What a fucking mistake. Great, more fuel to the fire. Stuff ourselves with mincemeat and wine until the tall man comes for his night's reward. A nice little menu of entrees. Because of their infection by the Smile Dog Basilisk and possibly others, they've now become the targets of Der Grossman, who's looking to wipe them off the face of the earth. So, if they really are all done for, how would Murph have survived? I'm not sure he did. I think Arthur, instead, is Murphy's younger brother that is referenced, and his connection to his older brother is where the origins of his interest and exposure to this world of image entities and demons comes from. There's not a lot of direct evidence for this, but the two names being connected and then the mention of a brother just feels too perfect from a storytelling perspective. Either way, the prickheads seem to be in a heap of trouble, and there's still yet more to find. Firstly, I want to point out these images. The art at the tops of the pages are often distorted in an almost unrecognizable way, but they can be repaired. How? I don't actually know. This is one of those things I found sourced on the ChainmailChasers Discord. Either way, what this reveals are the numbers 202. Now, I should say this isn't really the order these discoveries were made. This is actually kind of later in the game, but I wanted to start here because the rest flows so well together. Anyway, going to paranormalprickheads.com/202.html takes us to our first hidden page. Why can't I move in the darkroom anymore? Oh, I was a ghost. And then a video from Ice Cream Monkey Fan, uploaded the same day as the Paranormal Prickheads web ad titled Victimized. It's an incredibly distorted upload, the video glitching and cutting throughout, showing clips from previous videos smashed and chopped together. But there is a discernible message to be found from Ice Cream Monkey Fan, from the dark room we last saw him in the Heaven's Stairway video. I can't actually feel anything here in the dark room. I realize now because it hurts. I don't know what's going on. I'm at a computer, right? So why does it hurt? Like when your leg gets tingly but pushing on my brain. It's a push at the back of my brain like rubbing a mosquito bite. It's a push at the back of my brain like in your stomach when you go down a roller coaster.
Where am I? I'm a
I think I'm dying. And then, a figure appears from the darkness. It almost looks like the Hat Man or Indrid Cold, but something about the way it's talking makes it sound like it's more than an incidental appearance.
No angels can hurt you now. The rest, the work will be done soon.
We'll probably circle back to this one, but there is still more to see. Our first real puzzle starts at the About page we were just visiting. Throughout Aaron's bio, there are a few letters out of place, seemingly random characters in italics, but this is anything but random. Combining them, they spell out "take it to the pound." Taking this and punching it into the address bar leads us to another secret page. What we find here is another secret conversation between the users, pertaining to their plans to slow or stop the spread of this entity. Though there isn't unanimous agreement, the two schools of thought in the conversation are either wiping everything related to it entirely, or trying their best to sterilize the information on the website and leave it up, in the hopes it can help anyone who may also be afflicted with this entity. There's also a piece of text that's a little more difficult to see: thrown away. Plugging that into the address bar, we get our next secret page, which continues that conversation but highlights the word idea. Idea takes us to another secret page, this time a little less conventional. Just a series of numbers. Another puzzle. Using the 1s and 2s as lines and the other numbers as character positions, we can actually use this to cross-reference the previous idea page and find our next keyword: Zuol. This leads us to a secret page detailing more information about basilisks the prickheads have been uncovering and theorizing about. It seems to reinforce our ideas about angels consuming basilisks, and even intentionally spreading them to propagate their food source, but keeping them from becoming an invasive species. They describe it as like farming or gardening. There's something else very intriguing about this page too. The name Zuol. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I was not, it is Zwolle. It immediately stood out to me as strange, so I looked into it. Zwolle is a town in the Netherlands, whose patron saint is the Archangel Michael, who according to legend, protected Zwolle from an attack by a dragon, according to visitzwolle.com. Seems pretty relevant to the story up to this point, with angels and basilisks. For the final chain of the puzzle, we'll need to head back to the broken Der Grossman page. Here, we find the exact same image as the one found on Zwolle, depicting an angel slaying a basilisk. The other images on this page seem to be broken, but we can see what their file names were, and through this we find our next keyword, Der Ritter, the other name for Der Grossman that we know of. Going to the Der Ritter page, we find it to be an unscrambled version of the Der Grossman page. This mostly just showcases folktales featuring Der Grossman, and interestingly points out that whether this entity is a fallen angel or just a regular angel is not entirely clear. This page, however, leads us to the final page in our investigation. The images featured on this page aren't all what they seem. Specifically, this Der Ritter image. It's a GIF, and for one frame, a frame you won't even be able to see when you load the page because of where the image is on the layout, the text Der Drake replaces Der Ritter, which translates to the dragon, and that is our final keyword. Flashing light warning ahead for this next page. We find ourselves confronted by the smile dog, or should I say, the dragon.
So really, the end of our little game. How unfortunate. I do not orchestrate these changes. Some of these landscapes I cannot cross. But I see enough. I can tell how many journeys there will be. I tell them now. See you soon.
And below, an image counting all the way up to 13. So, with season 1 done and this little website investigation marks only part 1 of potentially 12 more arcs. But for now, we've reached the end of this one. There is one last little detail I want to point out though. It could be a coincidence, but it just feels too perfect. If we take this image and interpret it as pointing us to a Bible verse, specifically Revelations 13:1, we find something very interesting. And I stood upon the sand of the sea, and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. This is pretty much exactly the sight we find in one of the images on the beast's page. Just saying, it's an interesting connection.
And so we've reached the end of our investigative portion of Chainmail Chasers. I'll be honest, this breakdown has been fairly sparing all things considered. There is so much detail packed into each frame and web page in this series. I think you could still go through the whole thing yourself and get a lot out of it. It's so expansive, it's pretty hard to wrap my head around and keep things straight. And it's also probably worth noting that the way I've told the story is a lot closer to how I uncovered it than the way it was being investigated at the time this stuff was being revealed. As I understand it, there were whole events where videos and parts of the website were revealed, and the plot may have moved forward in a different order than I present here. But this video is more focused on what it would be like to uncover this stuff as it is now, as I did. Oh, and also I want to give a big thank you to both the Chainmail Chasers Discord and Wiki. I tried my best to discover this stuff naturally myself, but for certain portions where I was stuck, these resources were invaluable. Anyway, I think I've gone over enough to present some of my own analysis, both story-wise and thematic. So, let's jump in.
Chainmail Chasers is probably going to be the longest part of this video, and the series spans so much history and media, from YouTube channels to the website archives, from ancient biblical times to the future. So, to get the full picture, I want to start by explaining the events of the series in a more organized way. And we'll need to start by going back, way back. We start in ancient times with the creation of the beast, a fallen angel who eats from the fruit of knowledge and becomes a being of consumption. Specifically, the beast is both an entity of information who also consumes information insatiably. This leads to a self-destructive Ouroboros of self-consumption in which the beast becomes the first demon from where all other demons spawn. Demons and angels have an interesting relationship, though I'll specifically be discussing basilisks here. Basilisks are demons of creation from tragedy, of information, and angels seem to consume basilisks, whether that be the fallen angels doing so nefariously or regular angels combating the harm of the basilisks. We see the way this consumption affects data as well, wiping computer hard drives and memories, as both work similarly in the world of demons and angels. One example I haven't mentioned is on the Misc Stories page containing community-submitted creepypastas. One is titled The Tall Man, but the page is missing and the author's name is just garbled characters, presumably a victim of Der Grossman, aka the Tall Man. What's interesting about this relationship from the perspective of the beast is that it's both. The beast is the first demon and a fallen angel, which is the reason for its self-destructive nature. An angel who must consume and a demon who must spread. That dichotomy is at the heart of the beast's being, and at the core of its prophecy. There is a prophecy that the beast will bring about the end of days, where tragedies will erode the collective human psyche enough that demons will become corporeal, and the beast will have a grand feast in which its consumption will end existence as we know it. There is also a possibility that the bisected king, an entity partially human and partially demonic, will usurp the beast and instead instate unending suffering at the end of days. But we'll get back to the bisected king in a minute. It is said that an incredibly dangerous basilisk exists that spawns from a tragedy directly linked to the beast, but its current status is unknown. In my mind, the further back we go with these basilisk images in their evolution, the closer we will get to this much more powerful basilisk as a point of origin. This hypothesis comes from the resemblance of the smile dog images with that of the traditional demon artwork we see on the Paranormal Prickhead site, and as the chain goes along, the further away we get from this look. It's the reason I think the dragon says, "I am not the source," while also clearly being one of the most powerful image entities. Of the images currently in circulation, this is the closest to the one which is most powerful. By the 1990s, the version of the dragon we see is circulating in the Smile chain letters. With this history in mind, let's flash forward to 2002. To start, webmaster Aaron starts a little personal website dedicated to horror and the paranormal, Paranormal Prickheads. In October of the same year, Murph, aka Googly Moogly, stumbles across the dragon being spammed by user Grinning Ghoulie. Becoming infected by the entity, by 2005, Paranormal Prickheads is expanded, and Murph joins, befriending the other members. It's unclear exactly when the rest of them became infected, but by 2008, the Prickheads realized that their hobby of the paranormal has exposed them to multiple basilisks, and are researching the origins and nature of their afflictions and the entities that caused them. Soon after, this leads them to become targets for Der Grossman, an angel, fallen or otherwise, looking to consume them and the basilisks who inhabit them. In their desperation, they discuss whether to keep the site up to help future readers in similar situations or wipe it completely. The site was last updated in 2009, at which point it's not entirely clear what happens. Did anyone survive? Was the site removed by the Prickheads, or perhaps an attack by Der Grossman? We'll pick back up with Arthur. In my head, Arthur is Murph's younger brother, and Arthur's connection to this world of angels and demons comes from his connections to his older brother. One possible explanation could be that Arthur was exposed through Murph's local archive, which the other Prickheads routinely warn Murph to delete, implying he's hesitant to do so. Arthur's vagueness on his history may be due to hesitance to share, or from a lack of memory, if Murph was consumed by Der Grossman. I just don't know. Alright, so Grace begins Chainmail Chasers, and in her search for creepypasta origins, is infected by the dragon basilisk. Arthur takes note of this and reaches out, interestingly echoing the path of his brother, entering a new community of afflicted researchers, this time of a new era. Together, Grace, Arthur, and Davy begin their search to understand the entity Grace is afflicted with, and how to cure it. In this process, we also see records from the past being revived, that being the Archive of Paranormal Prickheads and Ice Cream Monkey Fan. Who would be doing this other than the Chainmail Chasers? I don't know, but I do think it's possible Grace is in contact with some surviving member of the Prickheads. There's a conversation we get a snippet of between Grace and an unheard participant in the working timeline video that I assumed to be Arthur, but it's possible it's someone else, maybe a prickhead, which is where they'd get access to revive the site. In any case, that's basically where we are now, but we have to remember, this series moves into the future, / modern times kinda. Ice Cream Monkey Fan's story starts ahead of all this. In 2021, an event occurs in New York City in which the rain begins pulling people into the sky, before many of them come crashing down with grins on their faces. I think this 2021 date is the reason the series is set back in 2019, so that we still have time leading up to the Heaven Stairway incident. During this event, a girl sees an entity that looks like the troll face, which Ice Cream Monkey Fan hypothesizes to be a basilisk. The specifics of this event's origins and nature are a little unclear to me, but I'm going to refrain from getting too caught up in it. My best guess is that this and the preceding rain events are some of the tragedies that lead up to the end of days, strengthening the demons in the physical world, explaining the troll face. Either way, during a later rain event, Ice Cream Monkey Fan is pulled into the sky and taken into a slip in space-time, back to 2001 in a limbo between reality and hell. Here, I think Ice Cream Monkey Fan becomes the bisected king, a mad boy caught between a human half and a demonic half. The part that's of most contention to me is the nature of his demonic half. My first thought was that this trollface basilisk being at the center of the stairway incident was the demonic half, but he doesn't seem to recognize it, and it's referenced by the dragon as a runt. So then I thought maybe the Grin friend is, but he's referenced as something separate than just Ice Cream Monkey Fan's friend. So my current theory is that Indrid Cold is actually a demon. He's described as being friendly, but also as coming from some other plane of existence and appearing right before tragedy. Sounds a lot like a demon to me. And his dialogue towards Ice Cream Monkey Fan does sound a lot like something a demonic half of a bisected king trying to usurp the beast would say. The work will be done soon. As for Grin Friend, I'm not sure. I think it's the same entity as Grin Fiend and Grin Ghoulie. My current theory is that it may be some manifestation of a larger source that animates and spreads these entities, as we see it seemingly spamming these images across decades. Sort of in relation to that, I have had the thought that Grin Friend is actually the troll face, simply because it's trolling forums and emails by spamming these basilisks, but that's probably just a goofy passing thought. I do think the recurring Grin theme with all of these entities is relevant, though. I think the source of this smile motif comes from the animalistic origins of the demons. We see them depicted in older art with these skull-like faces, which could be interpreted further along the chain of evolution as a smile, which is why I think it's a common attribute. But as for a plot level analysis, that's all I've got for now. But you know me, I'm not one to stop at just a plot summary. For this last part, I want to get a bit into the themes I see this series exploring. First, I just want to point out the importance that the series places on the spread of these basilisks. The way they evolve and change as they disseminate between users across the internet. It parallels the way in which creepypastas actually naturally evolve and change, the same way I discussed chain letters doing. The way these entities work are so specific to the way that the internet spreads and alters everything from memes to horror stories. The force that animates them, which Davey references, just feels like a supernaturally personified version of the natural processes of the web. And I could go on about this a lot more, but I actually have a bigger analysis section near the end of this whole video where I go over this in much more detail, so I don't want to repeat myself too much. For now, I want to talk about internet trauma. This series is very occupied with the effects of stumbling across these horror stories or images from the internet, which if known or understood will lead to terrible consequences, a curse that manifests with painful mental effects, the image itself remaining long after it was first seen in the mind of the viewer, ceaselessly tormenting them. Though in the world of Chainmail Chasers, this is a supernatural phenomenon compelled by a world of angelic and demonic forces, the reality of the internet is that the very same thing can occur. In all the wonderful things the internet allows us to do, it's also a place where we can find some pretty shocking stuff, especially as kids. These can be seemingly harmless, like screamer videos whose faces still unsettle us now because of our first introduction to them as terrified children, or scenes from movies we were too young to see, or creepypasta stories that kept us up at night. But they can also be more serious. People of any age, but especially children with unsupervised access to the internet, can and often are exposed to horrific things they can't unsee, whether that be real graphic violence and gore or explicit media. And this can have lasting effects long after we've been initially exposed, whether that be nightmares, spawning new fears and phobias, fear or deeply rooted misconceptions about intimacy, disassociation, or the image or video replaying in your head days or weeks after seeing it. And these vectors for trauma can appear even in places that seem unassuming. From personal experience growing up, Steam community pages had a lot of this. World War II game pages with real gore images from the 40s, or just lots of porn. Hell, Google Images can have some wild results from innocuous searches. And I think the removal of proper context surrounding this violence or explicit imagery makes them all the more affecting. Our brains don't know how to properly categorize or deal with them. And so coming back to Chainmail Chasers, I think the concepts in this series will speak in a deeply relatable way to a whole generation of internet users who spent their afternoons after school and late nights surfing the net completely unrestricted, finding themselves with trauma they may not have even recognized at the time from the things they saw there. That's a little grim. This next thematic connection is no less grim, but maybe a bit more optimistic. I want to focus mostly on the way these basilisks and angels work and the more religious elements to the series. If we can understand the basilisks as sinful information, when they infect a person, it could almost be seen as imparting sinful thoughts onto someone, almost paralleling Eve biting the apple. They become these intrusive thoughts, and in the eyes of these angels, just by having these sinful thoughts, you are guilty of sin. The impure thoughts must be destroyed, to the point of destroying the person themselves. This whole system parallels a theme of religious guilt, a feeling of intense shame, not having done something wrong, but having impure thoughts. And though I think the religious angle makes sense here with the world of Chainmail Chasers, this concept of intrusive thoughts which cause feelings of intense guilt and shame are common among those, for instance, with OCD. And obviously, as if it needs to be said, impure thoughts do not determine the morality of a person, but on that note, this thematic connection could be strengthened down the line if Grace learns to deal with the effects of the dragon and finds a way to live with it without attacks from the angel, emphasizing the idea that intrusive thoughts can be lived with and don't define your own sense of morality. Of course, though, this is just one interpretation of the themes of the series that may not at all be what it's going for. This is more of just a thought experiment, coming from one angle. Either way, I'm really interested to see where the series goes from here, and I'll be keeping a close eye on it. And you should be too. The next season is coming very soon. It might have already started by the time this video comes out, so I would recommend you go subscribe to the Chainmail Chasers channel yourself. It seems like there's definitely going to be a lot more interesting stuff coming from there soon.
Hey everyone. I'm starting to think this bootleg operating system wasn't a good investment. Either way, there's one more piece I'd like to cover, but it's going to be a little different. Normally, I cover web series, or ARGs, or video games. Especially in these digital horror videos, the fact that these series are pieces of unfiction is a core connective tissue. But now, I'd like to briefly talk about a film that covers both many aspects of web series, but also encapsulates so much of the overarching themes of creepypastas as an internet genre, as well as the running themes we talk about in all these digital horror videos. Nostalgia, growing up online, stuff like that. Because it's a film, the way I talk about it is going to be a bit different. The etiquette of talking about film is a little bit different than web series, so I'll put it right here at the beginning that there will be big spoilers for the film. I'm not quite going scene by scene, but I am going to be pretty comprehensive in order to analyze it properly. And like with all of these projects, I want to implore you to watch it for yourself first. Like, for real, do it. It's an amazing film. But it also means I'll be covering the breakdown section a bit differently. I can't show much of the actual footage of the film on YouTube, so a lot of it is going to be talking to the camera, and the portions that aren't are going to look like this. With all of that said, let's watch We're All Going to the World's Fair.
Okay. We're All Going to the World's Fair is the feature debut of director Jane Schoenbrunn, who currently has an upcoming A24 film, I Saw the TV Glow, and previously created the documentary A Self-Induced Hallucination, which covered the phenomenon of the Slender craze. We're All Going to the World's Fair is about Casey, a shut-in teen living with her single father. Casey is a big horror fan, and one winter finds herself entrenched in a creepypasta known as the World's Fair Challenge. That is where we start. The film opens with Casey sitting at her computer, recording a video of her attempting the World's Fair Challenge, a vaguely defined creepypasta ritual and trend. She repeats the phrase,
"I want to go to the World's Fair,"
pokes her finger with a pin in one of the most viscerally upsetting scenes in the film for me, and then watches the video which supposedly rounds out the ritual, very reminiscent of The Ring and its ilk. What exactly the World's Fair Challenge is in the film isn't entirely clear, but the central element seems to be that after you complete the ritual, you will begin experiencing physical and mental changes, escalating as time goes on. Participants share their changes in videos, as well as theorize about the phenomenon itself and interact with each other's stories. After Casey completes the ritual herself, and an incredible title sequence following shots of wintry, desolate strip malls, we see her watching a series of other people's videos reporting their effects. One reports he can't feel his body anymore, another that she's turning to plastic, yet another that he feels Tetris pieces filling up his body. While it seems apparent that the World's Fair Challenge is fictional in the film, it serves as a collaborative storytelling project, with people creatively coming up with their own theories and effects. However, people rarely, if ever, break character, leading to all the haziness of reality and belief that we're familiar with web series and ARGs that, like the ones I cover on the channel. What this means is that from the beginning, it's not entirely clear what Casey believes. Has she bought in and believes it's all real, or is she playing along with everyone else? Is what she experiences a real manifestation of something supernatural? We'll come back to all of that. But for now, after watching through a few of the other participants' videos, we see Casey make her first update of her own. She first discusses her motivation for doing the challenge, that she's a longtime horror fan and has always wanted to try living in a horror movie. Then she talks about her childhood experiences of sleepwalking, bringing up a sort of disassociative state that she used to experience, and how since completing the challenge and watching the video, the feeling is creeping back.
It was like watching myself on a TV all the way across the room, and I was aware of my actions. Yes, granted, I was aware, but I couldn't control myself. I've been kind of feeling that way recently ever since I watched that video. That feeling's kind of creeping up on me a little bit. Because I tell you, if I might be aware that a car's coming, but I would just stay there. My whole body's numb. I know I should be cold right now, but I don't feel anything.
Seemingly that same night, she makes her way into the shed outside her home, upset about her videos not performing well. She takes out her father's shotgun from where it's kept, puts it back, and then lays down on a couch, watching ASMR on a projector. The next video auto-plays, and Casey is faced with something disturbing, an ominous message from the channel JLB, calling her out and demanding to speak with her. We find out that JLB is a shut-in middle-aged man who is seemingly obsessed with the World's Fair Challenge. He's deep in the game of it all, and uploads many videos about it, and other related horror and conspiracy topics. On a Skype call between him and Casey, he encourages her to keep making videos. One other interesting element to JLB is that he appears to be making these videos from a child's bedroom. Is this his child's bedroom? His own childhood bedroom, which he's not grown from? It's unclear. The introduction of JLB gets us into the real meat of the film, which is a sort of back and forth between Casey and JLB via their videos. In Casey's videos, her psychological changes become more intense and apparent. It almost seems as if some other entity is taking over her body, slowly gaining control over her. This starts when Casey films herself sleeping and an unsettling grin appears across her face. Later, in one of the most brilliant scenes of the film, both from a directorial and performance perspective, Casey films herself energetically dancing and singing when this happens.
Melting, melting.
And this idea of something taking over her seems to be solidified when she appears to address JLB directly in a bout of sleepwalking.
I see you there. Even if you won't show your face, you can't stop me.
What's more concerning, though, are her more grounded changes. She seems to be slipping into darker and more depressive thoughts, filming videos of her looking into oncoming traffic and hinting at an ominous fate.
My father keeps a gun in the barn. Thinks I don't know where. I swear, someday soon, I am just gonna disappear. And you won't have any idea what happened to me.
With her updates becoming increasingly more worrisome, JLB continues watching and reaching out, making his intent clear. He wants to save her, whatever that means. But Casey's responses, whether they be from her or whatever entity seems to be taking over her, are becoming more hostile and resentful. For instance, in one video, she performs a tarot card reading where she confronts and criticizes him. The back and forth reaches its breaking point first when Casey uploads a video explaining her plans to turn the shotgun on either her father or herself.
My father needs to go. 3 shots to the stomach. And I'll stand there and watch him bleed. I don't want to do it. I don't think I'll be able to control myself. Maybe I'll just kill myself instead.
Then, seemingly taken over again, we see her cover herself in glow-in-the-dark paint and rip apart her stuffed animal. She leaves the room and comes back, seemingly herself again. In the final video, she says,
I know how it's going to end now. I'm going inside the video, through the computer, inside the screen.
Casey and JLB have another Skype call. While talking, Casey seems resigned to her fate of what may be eventual death or disappearance, referencing something called the strange loop theory of the World's Fair phenomenon, which we will return to. She also says this, which is interesting.
The video is a fake. But so is all of this. What does that make the video?
JLB, clearly concerned about Casey's well-being, asks her if they can talk out of game. He breaks the immersion for the first time in the film, actually acknowledging the fiction of the World's Fair challenge. Casey at first seems a little confused, not knowing what the technical game terms he's using mean.
But we need to go out of game first. Is that okay?
Sure. What's that?
It means outside the margins of the game. The MMORPG.
I didn't know that term.
And then appears almost distraught at his discussion of the challenge as fake, as he begins to inquire about her mental health and asking if she does realize that none of this is actually real and that she doesn't have any plans to hurt herself or others. Casey becomes upset, saying,
Jesus Christ. They're just videos. What is wrong with you? They're pretend.
and is offended that he would think she would ever actually do anything like that. She ends the call, tells him to never call her again, and then accuses him of being a predator. From here on out, the perspective of the film shifts to the point of view of JLB instead of Casey. JLB is incredibly upset over the interaction, at first practicing to himself what he needs to say to get her to talk to him again, then trying and failing to call her repeatedly, finally ending by placing his hand on the screen itself. We see Casey's face in darkness, flashing with the lights of the World's Fair video, as we hear her say again,
"Someday soon, I am just gonna disappear. And you won't have any idea what happened to me."
The film ends with JLB recording a video. He explains an almost certainly fabricated story of how he and Casey ended up back in touch a year later, how she had been to a mental health facility and improved, how the two of them met up in person, and how, in the end, Casey told him that he had saved her. And the film ends. Despite its short hour and 26-minute runtime, there is an enormous amount of thematic, storytelling, and character ground the film covers. Though many of the film's critics claim nothing much happens in the film and that the runtime is too long, in my opinion, the film packs about as much of a punch as you possibly can in under an hour and a half. That is to say, I don't think I'll be able to cover everything this film has to offer in this video, but I'll try my best at discussing what I think the most relevant themes are to this video, especially as we get closer to the final discussion I want to have, a history of creepypasta and its storytelling. Okay, so what exactly is going on in We're All Going to the World's Fair? A good place to start would be the film's themes of escapism. Both Casey and JLB use the World's Fair story as a means to slip out of their own realities and into a fictional and romanticized world, where the forces behind your problems are mysterious and supernatural instead of just mundane and lonely. There is a mystery to be solved, a cinema to their journeys through these issues. Casey says it herself, she always wanted to try living in a horror movie. The World's Fair gives her an explanation for her feelings of disassociation, numbness, and depression, and an exciting explanation at that. JLB's escapism is a little less clear, as we don't know very much about him. Though some have speculated the room he creates his videos from is perhaps that of a child of his who's passed, I believe I heard Schönbrunn say that that's not the case in an interview somewhere. I do think that the key to understanding JLB does lie in his room, though, and maybe it's not so bleak. It's simply his kid's childhood bedroom who has since grown up and moved out, now converted into an office. From this perspective, we could see JLB's behavior as reflecting this piece of him that is now missing. His interactions with Casey, his need to save her, coming from an emptiness he feels as he is no longer needed as a parent or guardian. Through the fiction of the World's Fair, he feels like he can guide and defend Casey, fulfill a purpose he's since lost. In a way, Casey and JLB both sort of represent different perspectives on troubled, damaged, or fading childhoods. These themes are reinforced visually throughout the film, whether that be with the desolate Toys R Us in the opening credits, Casey's destruction of her favorite childhood stuffed animal, or JLB sitting alone in a pristine kid's bedroom. It's a self-identified coming-of-age film, so these themes are very much involved. You could even understand the World's Fair challenge and its effects on both of them individually and their relationship as a manifestation of how our experiences in the world force us to grow up. Casey's innocence or childhood fun interrupted or destroyed by the creeping personification of the World's Fair taking her over, as growing older might expose you to further trauma and harsher realities of the adult world and unveil more mental health struggles into teenage and young adult life. JLB, trying to cling to his guardian role, wants to save her from these issues, which is just as impossible for him as they are unavoidable for Casey. He's even told outright,
"You can't stop me."
So that's one way of looking at the childhood element. But for all that the relationship between Casey and JLB is, in the end, it's a fairly brief blip in the scope of their lives. What might be the most compelling thing about it is actually more about how they found each other in the first place. And this goes back to escapism. Much like JLB, we don't know much about Casey's life, but from what we do see, it seems fairly clear that Casey is a very isolated person. We don't see her interact with any friends or even family, aside from one off-camera yell from her father. And the same goes for JLB to some extent. Though we see the brief, blurry appearance of someone else living in the house with him, he is wholly absorbed in the World's Fair. In their isolation and seeming unhappiness with their lives, when they escape to the internet and the World's Fair community, they are not just looking for an outlet for their problems, they're looking for connection, to express how they feel and for someone to listen. The collaborative nature of the World's Fair mythos allows them to join a community. JLB comes off as a creep throughout the film, and I think it's definitely possible that he is. But I also think it's pretty clear that at least some of this comes from him having a difficult time socializing, which is why his connections through the World's Fair mean so much to him, arguably to an unhealthy extent. There's an element here, though, of performance too. Maybe not unique to the internet, but definitely a specific expression of it. A self-awareness and effort to come off as authentic, despite being rehearsed. Casey practices her lines before her first video, which is later called back as JLB practices what to say to Casey to change her mind. Casey's frustration with her video's lack of views. And on the grander scale, JLB and almost everyone else in the World's Fair community are constantly performing, pretending to believe in the collaborative fiction, creating real connections through the false pretense which they all share the knowledge of. And though sometimes that kind of connection can lead to wonderful and lasting relationships, it's also just as possible that in the end, your connection was never really that strong. Their profile can disappear one day, or they can go offline and you never hear from them again. JLB is so obsessed with Casey's life, but how long have they actually known of each other's existence? Did he even know her real name?
That's not even my name.
In the end, despite his attempts to convince us otherwise, JLB never really knew Casey. This is going to sound like a really corny transition, but the film also seems to ask this pretty directly. Does Casey even know herself? Throughout the film, the concepts of identity and disassociation are either directly mentioned or gestured to multiple times, specifically as they relate to Casey's experience. Early on, she discusses childhood bouts of sleepwalking, which she explains as feeling like she's watching herself on a TV, aware of her actions but unable to stop them. And as her dive into the World's Fair progresses, this disassociative feeling reemerges and escalates to the point she almost seems to be taken over at various times, or have sudden moments of unexpected pure terror. Or perhaps terror that has been mounting and can't be held in any longer. By the end of the film, that idea of living through a monitor comes full circle, as she concludes she will end up going through the screen into the video. And you could even interpret this as being true in some sense, as her final shot is her face in darkness awash in the light of the video. Combined with her final line about disappearing, one could almost interpret this as another type of disassociation, a disassociation from JLB, or perhaps a final disassociation from her online identity as we've come to know it, her real life disappearing from our view, only leaving the narrative that was created in her videos and the version of her that people like JLB created in their heads. Her only visible identity, that which she left behind in the screen. Which leads us to the end, where JLB constructs his own false version of Casey for his own narrative, allowing him to continue his escapism in the World's Fair. But I do think Casey's mentions of identity, alienation, and separation from herself hold important relevance to her personally. And some of this, I think, has to do with a phrase that's mentioned briefly a couple of times in the film. First, in a flash you likely wouldn't notice, one of the videos she scrolls past titled The Strange Loop Theory. Later, near the end of the film, she asks JLB if he's ever heard of the Strange Loop Theory. So what is the Strange Loop Theory? In the context of the film, it's not entirely clear. It's some explanation for the World's Fair phenomenon, one of many different theories. But it's a real concept. Strange loops are like a paradox, a hierarchy where, as you move up to the top, you find yourself somehow back where you started. The best visual would probably be M.C. Escher's paintings, like the Impossible Staircases. Somehow, impossibly, you end up back at the start. It's a lot more complicated than that, and aside from a mathematical perspective, it's a concept that's been applied to everything from music to psychology, especially in the works of Douglas Hofstadter, like Gödel, Escher, Bach, and You Are a Strange Loop. Now, I'll be honest, I wouldn't say I have the deepest understanding of this concept or Hofstadter's works. I've never finished Gödel, Escher, Bach because, well, look at this thing. So maybe there's some stuff going over my head here, but I think I can apply this idea to some of the concepts in the film. The most obvious example to me is Casey's first and last shots in the film. In the opening shot of the film, Casey sits at her computer and we see her perform the World's Fair challenge, the light of the video flickering against her face. The final image we see of Casey is her once again surrounded in inky blackness, the lights of the video again dancing across her face. By the end of her progression through the World's Fair, feeling herself pulled further and further into it, she ends exactly where she started. One could argue this is more just a regular loop, but I think it hits the requirement, as Casey's journey through the World's Fair seems to take her closer to some kind of source or up a sort of hierarchy as she progresses through her symptoms. In any case, I think this strange loop concept really comes into play when we come back to Casey's identity. In Hofstadter's writing, he posits that the concept of the I, the self, is a strange loop, a paradox. Of course you know you're real, you're here. How do you know you're here? How do you define yourself, your identity? You can only really do so by referring back to yourself in the first place. No evidence that you, the subjective, continued experience of your consciousness and identity, exists without being self-referential. A strange loop. Further, Hofstadter concludes that the self is formed only by a system complex enough and with a large enough amount of data to refer back to itself and its experiences to form a cohesive narrative about itself. In short, the self is an illusion. And I think this idea ties into much of Casey's final conclusions about her fate and the World's Fair.
This world wasn't real. It's just some kind of big dream I need to wake up from.
Her feelings of disassociation culminating in the conclusion that none of this is real, and that her only way out is a final disassociation from herself. And for the World's Fair itself, she says,
"The video is a fake. But so is all of this. What does that make the video?"
If life itself is an illusion, what does it matter if the effects of the video were fictional or not, if she really is experiencing them? And that question, that right there, is I think the heart of the film. The core theme of the film is belief. The final question we're left with is if Casey ever really believed in the World's Fair, or if she was playing along the entire time. This question is laid out so perfectly because of Anna Cobb's incredible performance. Her final conversation with JLB is so ambiguous. Watching it back over and over, you find yourself switching back and forth as to which conclusion you come to. She seems so genuinely confused and even offended that JLB would even consider that she really believed any of it. But then she looks so destroyed and confused at the revelation that it's all a game. But I think choosing either as a concrete answer is reading it wrong. The ambiguity is the point, and it's something Jane Schoenbrunn also covers quite heavily in her film A Self-Induced Hallucination, mostly as it relates to the Slender Man legend. The nature of these online stories is that their reality is unclear. They are presented as true, and their audience or players are intent on keeping that veil of reality, are ARGs or unfiction projects. And though no one may actually believe them, they function as if they do, and at that point, what's the difference? I think that's the core concept here. From my perspective, Casey's belief fits into this gray area. Again, this world is an escape to her. It gives her a place of connection and an outlet for the difficult things she's experiencing personally. It's important for her that she does believe it, even if she really doesn't. I think she's choosing to believe it, convincing herself of its reality, creating a self-induced hallucination of her own. In the film, A Self-Induced Hallucination, one of the most interesting turns in the narrative around the Slender Man legend is after his origin is widely discovered to be fictional. For a little bit there, many users begin convincing themselves of ways he could still be real. Maybe because enough people believe he exists, that means he was manifested, an internet tulpa. Even folks who make videos attempting to disprove his existence walk on eggshells a bit, telling their audience that if they still believe he's real, that's okay. The fact that he could be real was important to a lot of these people, and I think we see the same thing here with Casey. And when JLB breaks her suspension of disbelief, tears the veil away, it's like ripping her only support structure away. For Casey, the narrative that this was her reality was something that seemed to help her, even if you could argue that it was unhealthy, and JLB was justified in his worry about her potential for violence, another element a self-induced hallucination covers in relation to Slender Man. But JLB isn't above this either. The narrative that he was an expert and a savior was important to him, even if he understood it was fictional in some way. And in the end, he can't let go of it, instead making up a story about how he was right all along. What's so interesting about both A Self-Induced Hallucination and We're All Going to the World's Fair is that they're so deeply immersed in the culture of creepypasta and online horror, and specifically the way they tell their stories as it relates to belief in reality. I seriously cannot recommend both of these films enough. They managed to find what might be the exact element of these online narratives and stories that set them apart from traditional horror narratives. And I guess that's where I want to head next. We've been sitting here talking about these projects and how they interpret or reference creepypasta, but what even is creepypasta? How do you define it? For this next section, I want to go over a broader look at creepypasta, its history, and try to connect these projects more deeply to creepypasta as a phenomenon over the years. Whoa, my God. I'm so disappointed in these frickin' stars, man. I charged them up with light all day and they were glowy, and then I sit down to record and they are nothing.
So here we are, the last lap. Hopefully I can wrap this up before whatever that thing is takes my soul or whatever. Just this last bit, let's see.
Creepypasta have been described as modern-day folklore, the internet's homegrown urban legends. When you think of creepypasta, you don't just think about the concept, you think about the stories and imagery that are inextricably tied to it. Jeff the Killer's ghoulish visage, the grainy black and white photos where Slender Man's silhouette peeks from behind the trees, or the twisted body of a Russian sleep experiment test subject. Stories about disturbing lost cartoons, a malevolent changeling infiltrating a camping trip, or a forgotten soul inhabiting a video game. On a basic level, creepypasta can be understood as internet horror stories, tales written on and spread around the web, frightening readers of all kinds. But what actually makes a story a creepypasta? Does it have to be a story, or can it be a video, or a piece of audio, or multimedia work? In my research for this video, one of the more surprising things I found was that a true definition was hard to come by, at least one that felt complete enough to use consistently. I'd like to try to posit a definition for creepypasta in this video, but we'll need to get a better understanding of them in order to do so. So let's start with the basics. Where does the word creepypasta even come from? Creepypasta is a term built under layers and layers of internet slang, which were developed and changed over decades, so I wouldn't blame you if its etymology isn't immediately obvious. It starts with the phrase copy and paste, as in copying and pasting text or images on a computer. This phrase evolved into copypasta, a term used to describe a piece of text which is reposted or copied and pasted across the internet, mostly for comedic effect. Creepypasta then seems like a natural evolution of the term, meaning a short horror story which is memetically disseminated around the internet. Some sources say the term creepypasta appeared in 2007, but I can date it at least to 2006 via 4chan thread archives. So that's it, right? Case closed. A creepypasta is a viral short horror story. Well, not quite. It's complicated, but I think to get a better understanding, I think it might be useful for us to take a look back at the real origins of copypasta, a familiar phenomenon at this point, chain letters. Doing some preliminary research, it seems the phenomenon of proper chain letters really start in the late 1800s as a fundraising tactic. Letters which ask for a small donation and then that the reader copy the letter multiple times and send their copies out to other recipients. The effect of this is an ever-growing chain of the same letters spreading out like a virus. It didn't take long for this style of marketing to catch on, and it was unprecedentedly effective. And though the form stayed the same, the contents changed and evolved. Incentive tactics employed for increased persuasion, promises of good luck if the letter was successfully forwarded, and as we talked about earlier, warnings of hardship, misfortune, and even death if you ignore it. Preying on the superstitious, the extra careful, or just those with OCD, to further the letter along the chain. And as mail moved digital into the 80s and 90s, chainmail became chain email, and all the same tactics followed. Now 10 times easier to copy and paste on a communication network that was nearly instant and unfathomably more connected. And so AOL inboxes were flooded with messages imploring the reader to send this to 10 friends, and the scare tactics followed too, invoking threats of curses, demons, and ghosts as motivation to move the message along. This is exactly the phenomenon we see chainmail chasers focus in on, turning the threats real with ancient cognito hazards. What's really interesting is how many of these chains exist with no purpose other than to continue their own circulation. Unlike their charity or pyramid scheme origins, no investment, financial or otherwise, is asked of the recipient, only that they spread the message further. Maybe that's why they worked so well. With no clear ulterior motive, it begs the question as to why someone would want to start this in the first place unless the warnings were true. And as we've come to see, the warnings began to take the form of horror stories, involving a specific ghost or demon which had its own unique history, written in classic urban legend fashion. As a side note, we will be coming back to urban legends. Oftentimes, the message was allegedly sent from the ghosts themselves. One fairly popular example that even shows up as a page on Paranormal Prickheads is the story of Carmen Winstead. Hi, my name is Carmen Winstead. I'm 17 years old. I am very similar to you. Did I mention to you that I'm dead? A few years ago, a group of girls pushed me down a sewer hole to try and embarrass me. When I didn't come back up, the police came. The girls said that I had fell, and everyone believed them. The police found my body in the sewer. I had a broken neck, and my face was torn off. Send this message to 15 people after you've listened to the whole message if you value your life. A boy called David received this message. He just left and deleted it. When he was in the shower, he heard laughing. My laughter. He got really scared and rushed to his phone to repost this message, but he was too late. The next morning, his mom entered his bedroom, and all she found was a message written in his blood, saying, "You will never have him back. No one has ever found his body yet because he is with me." A girl called Charlotte received this message, and she immediately sent it to 25 people, 10 more than required. I still watch over every second of her life to make sure she is safe and keep her and everyone close to her out of danger. Send this to 15 people in the next 5 minutes if you don't want your fate to be the same as David's. Your time starts now. The story is true. You can research it on Google. Scary stuff. And I'm sure you can see how the viral dissemination of a horror story specifically designed to be copied and pasted around the internet connects to this creepypasta term's origin. And it's a good start. It showcases how these stories replicate the language of classic ghost stories, present their stories as true, and how the internet spreads and even sometimes evolves them as slight alterations and typos spread and compound. You may find other versions of the Carmen Winstead chain letters with certain details added, missing, or altered from the version I've shared here. But it isn't all just poorly written spam emails. There's a lot more to what modern creepypasta is. and the real beginning of what we now call creepypasta in a more modern sense starts in the year 2001. Ted the Caver is considered by many to be the first real creepypasta in the way we understand them now, though it predates the term. It's not a chain letter, it's not a spam message. It's a rather detailed story, hosted on an amateur caver's Angel Fire blog, taking the form of his caving journal mixed with color commentary from him after the fact. It's different from these chain letters in that it is independently hosted and has no chain motive. It's just a story. It's also considerably longer and more detailed, taking about an hour or two to read. It's similar to these previously discussed chain letters, though, in that it presents itself as entirely true, coming from the perspective of the person who experienced it, and that it was eventually spread around the internet. I want to focus here, though, on what might be the most intriguing part of Ted's story. As I said, it presents itself as entirely true, a genuine series of blog posts from a man who's experienced something terrifying. Ted posts about his experiences caving with one of his buddies when they discover a small passage in the cave they're exploring. This passage is barely larger than a fist, but they can see that it opens up farther in. Excited by the prospect of being the first to ever enter this virgin passage, they begin a grueling months-long process of drilling and hammering the opening large enough to shimmy inside. Ted provides photos from this exploration, which for the claustrophobic among us are probably enough to send shivers down our spines without any of the horrors that follow. And they do follow. The whole time Ted is laying out his experiences, he alludes to something that happened which made him regret his choice to re-enter the cave, to come back again and again, to continue exploring the cave and make their way into that inaccessible passageway. The mix of real photos and real fear of the cramped, dark, suffocating spaces found while exploring caves, and the presentation of this whole thing as a real experience, gives the whole story a level of believability rarely found when reading a piece of horror fiction. Meanwhile, the looming threat of whatever Ted has been alluding to builds as they get closer and closer to making their way inside the passage, and things in the cave get stranger. Symbols on the walls, sounds from the caves. It's genuinely a good read. But despite what many readers thought at the time, the story is only partially true. It was written by an actual caver named Ted, and the images all showcase real photos he'd taken. Even the project to open up the passageway was real. In fact, many early entries in the story are directly taken from Ted's real caving journal. The concept of turning it into a fictionalized horror story came when Ted began to brainstorm ways to embellish the tale when he shared it via his Angel Fire website. There's a whole interview with the author, Ted Hiegman, on the Nick Bodick channel. It's a very interesting listen. Despite being many years before the creepypasta term came into existence, Ted the Caver set the standard for this type of story. The format, the growing tension, and most importantly, a story which presents itself to the internet as entirely real, as an authentic post about an authentic experience. And it brought this genre into the world surprisingly fully formed. Many modern creepypasta follow this exact same approach, and part of what helped the story be so impactful was the speculation and conversation surrounding it. The question as to whether or not it was real. In a pre-social media era of the internet, there wasn't an easy way of knowing. Ted discusses as much in his previously mentioned interview.
Although I still read a lot of comments about people asking if it was real and what happened to Ted. So I thought that was kind of funny, but...
You put out Ted the Caver at a time when there weren't really those types of horror stories coming out where the intention was to make the reader think that it was actually a true story.
Well, I think that is what made it work. To be fair, I think in today's social media era that I think it would have been discovered or not discovered, but disproven, or they would have found me or something. I just don't know if it would have got the traction it did 18 years ago.
In this early era of the internet, more of these foundational stories start popping up. Screenwriter Eric Heiserer, who would go on to write screenplays for Arrival, Bird Box, Lights Out, and more, created a story called Dionia House, hosted on the website dioniahouse.com. Told entirely through a similar found internet style via emails and blog posts, it tells the story of supernatural events surrounding the titular Dionia House. But another of these foundational stories has got to be one of my favorites. The Legend of Kisaragi Station. It's 11:18 p.m., January 8th, 2004. A user, later identified as Hasumi, posts to the Japanese message board 2chan in a thread titled, "Keep track of strange things around you." This may just be my imagination. Can I post it anyway? Go ahead. I've been riding a certain train for a while, but something seems off. I always take this train to work, but but it hasn't stopped at any stations for the past 20 minutes or so. It usually only takes 5 minutes, 7 or 8 at worst. Oh, and there's 5 other passengers, but they're all sleeping. It would be really bad if the driver had an epileptic fit or something. You should check on the conductor. Still no sign of stopping, so alright, I'll take a look. There were blinds or something covering the window, so I couldn't see the conductor or the driver. Knock on the window? I tried that, but nobody answered. And so it goes on. Other users on the thread responding and offering advice for Hasumi's predicament. Eventually, the train stops at a station and Hasumi gets off. But she doesn't recognize it. Kisaragi Station, the kanji for which is the same as the word devil. Devil Station? Yikes. The train leaves before she can get back on. Hasumi calls her parents on her cell phone, but they don't know any Kisaragi Station either. The other users start searching for it themselves. I checked online too, and the name Kisaragi Station isn't coming up. Hasumi updates. There's really just nothing out here. All I can see are fields and mountains. But I think I'll be able to make it back if I go down the track, so I'll keep pushing on. Thank you very much. Treat this as a joke if you will, but can I come to you if I encounter any more trouble? The other users respond, assuring her that they'll be there, and Hasumi is never heard from again. What's so intriguing about this story isn't just that it, again, presents itself entirely through the internet and presents itself as entirely authentic, but in some ways it is authentic. These interactions weren't pre-scripted. They were the actual responses of actual users on the thread, responding to Hasumi's posts, and then Hasumi responds right back in real time. It's this dynamic form of storytelling that not only creates an active environment in which the readers at the time get to literally participate in it under the assumption that it's real, but its authenticity and subtlety eventually turned it into an actual full-fledged urban legend in Japan. It's so emblematic of where internet horror was headed, especially into the year 2004. And it's the exact type of reality-blurring interactive storytelling which We're All Going to the World's Fair is concerned with. Ted the Caver is a perfect example of a Web 1.0 horror story, hosted entirely on its own website, readers coming to view the content as is. But for creepypasta to truly take on their mimetic quality and follow in the footsteps of their chain letter predecessors, the internet would need to be a lot more social. And as we move into the 2000s with websites focused on user-generated content like 2chan, forums, and social media, this begins to start. Kisaragi Station is a great example of how powerful the dynamic and interactive elements can be, and it's really just the beginning of this revolution. Forums like Something Awful and 4chan are where this really kicks off. Early horror memes start to appear like Zalgo, a Lovecraftian-type creature that infects and changes comic strips. A concept started by the Something Awful user Shmorky in the horror and absurdist comic parodies he hosted on his own website. The distorted Zalgo text is still commonly used today, and these comics feel like a precursor to the I'm Sorry John / Gorefield genre. In what feels like a precursor to the original Slender Man post, a story called I Found a Digital Camera in the Woods begins spreading around forums in 2004, posted to all sorts of boards. Claiming to be the true story of someone discovering photos on a digital camera in the woods, it's mostly told through a series of blurry images taken in a dark and foggy forest. A few of the photos contain photoshopped silhouettes of mysterious creatures, but the real genius comes in the photos that are less obvious. Images of an empty forest that you can't help but inspect, hoping to find something, building your own anxiety as you lean in, scrubbing every pixel, breath bated for when something finally pops out at you. One of the most iconic creepypasta figures of all, the Rake, was initially created in 2005, collaboratively designed by 4chan users in a thread created to design a new monster. Later in 2006, Something Awful user Brian Somerville posts a story featuring the Rake on a personal blog, which is the original story many now associate with the creature. 2006 is also generally an important year for our history with this term. As far as my first-hand research can tell, searching back through 4chan archives, 2006 into 2007 is when we start seeing the phrase creepypasta start popping up in everyday use. And these threads are really fascinating. When it starts, it essentially just means a scary story. The emphasis of the phrase is less on the story itself and more so on how it's being shared. It represents the social phenomenon of sharing them with each other, not anything specific to the tropes or content. A story becomes a creepypasta once it's been creepypasted, shared the same way you would campfire stories or urban legends, just online. And early on, that's basically what they are. People posting largely pre-existing urban legends or ghost stories, many predating the internet. It's always interesting something when one of these legends comes up that feel especially indicative of where creepypasta would be headed, for instance Polybius, an urban legend from the 1980s about a mysterious game that appears in arcades across the country created by a company called Sinislosion. No such company can be found, and the actual gameplay of the cabinet is up for debate, but playing it supposedly had adverse effects like addiction, seizures, and hallucinations, and it's said these games were visited by mysterious men in black. The legend has spawned many gameplay and even full cabinet recreations. One of my favorite examples of these early creepypastas is one that is literally just a slightly edited version of an excerpt from the book House of Leaves by Mark Z. Danielewski. It's a good book, so it makes for a compelling creepypasta, especially since it's taking from a rather self-contained piece of the book, the 5.5-minute hallway portion. Some of the changes are slightly humorous though, like changing Will Navy Navidsid's name to the more common Davy to stave off questions about the original character's slightly unusual nickname, and removing the names of the other characters in the scene so not to bring up confusion about people previously established in the book. I find it really interesting seeing how these 4chan users react to this phenomenon. They seem addicted to reading and sharing them. I guess before a place like creepypasta.com existed, the best way to get horror stories from the internet was to just ask someone to share ones they know. But these people are absolutely fiending for more, creating new threads asking for more or requesting that someone share a new one they haven't seen before and creating collections of ones they've read. They love them. And as this sharing continues and the common urban legends run out rather quickly, the natural evolution is for users to start writing their own. And some really unique stuff comes out of this. A genre called existence Easter eggs starts, where people explain strange and obscure ways you can allegedly activate horrific phenomena, many times leading to a reward if you make it through. Hey guys, let's get some delicious creepypasta over here. On any night with a crescent moon, open Winamp or any other music program you might have on your computer that has a shuffle program. Empty your mind and keep clicking the forward button. If you're rather unlucky, a song named I'm Your Problem Now.mp3 will start playing. For the first minute, it will be completely silent. Close your eyes when the screams start, and do not open them for any reason. Horrible imagery will fill your mind of corpses and unimaginable evil. This will happen as a full 7 minutes of this song's horrible cacophony of screams and sounds continues. If you make it through those torturous 7 minutes, you will wake up on a bench in a deserted Greyhound station. A faceless man at the other end of the station will offer you a cigarette. If you don't accept it, your eyes will open and the song will be gone and no time will have passed. If you choose to accept it, however, this man will divulge to you the secrets of life. After you're done smoking, take the ticket out of his pocket and board the bus coming into the station. You will wake back in your house, and exactly 12 minutes will have passed since you started listening. The problem is that anyone who survived the song goes insane from the information they've just learned. Just like with most of the creepypasta we've gone over so far, the writing is all done in a way to suggest the stories are real, even if nobody really believes them. Leftover writing styles taken from the urban legends they're inspired by. Into 2007, things start to solidify a bit more, and more original content starts appearing. The first ever SCP is created, in a 4chan post briefly describing SCP-173 in the format that SCP case files would eventually adopt, as the intriguing nature and implied larger world encouraged others to slowly develop SCP into a more organized community. Alongside SCP, the Holder series is created, in a slightly different style, similar in that it documented a series of anomalous objects, 538 to be exact, that if brought together would bring about the end of the world. Though the Holder series hasn't had much relevance in recent times, the SCP community continues to thrive and evolve, being one of the biggest communal writing projects on the internet, spawning a multitude of games and indie films. SCP is also a great example of both the continuation of presenting these stories as real being integral to their format, as the SCP wiki is written entirely in fiction, and as something we'll start to see in the future, which is initial standalone posts growing a community which build out their worlds. 2007 also sees the creation of the story Kill Switch, written by Catherine Valente on the Invisible Games website, which details the story of an obscure survival horror game from the late 80s, which deletes itself after being completed. The story even presents rumors of a video of someone who owns the last remaining copy of the game, and gameplay recreations appeared out of the community surrounding the story, which feels like a natural evolution from Polybius. On that note, actually, it's something I didn't mention in the breakdown, but We're All Going to the World's Fair also includes a brief snippet of World's Fair video game video, which feels like another incredibly accurate nod to this genre of creepypasta media. 2008 to 2009 is where creepypasta really starts to define itself in the modern sense. The addicted masses create their own websites like creepypasta.com to organize and publish them in a more formal fashion. It's also around this time that some of the more influential stories appear, including a familiar face, smile.jpg or SmileDog. What's really interesting about this story is how it both functions as a piece of chainmail in that the story implies the reader must pass the image along to someone else, but also as a sort of commentary on chain letters, since most of the story itself is simply about this image and not directly telling the reader what to do. In 2009, Chris Straub publishes the story Candle Cove, the godfather of the now popular lost episode genre of creepypasta. Following in the footsteps of creepypasta's earliest predecessors, it takes the form of a forum discussion where users reminisce on a childhood TV show they used to watch on Channel 58. Their memories of the show get more disturbing and strange as things go along, and in the end, it's revealed that their parents only ever remember them watching Static. This story would pave the way for later lost episode stories like Dead Bart or Suicide Squidward, and Jane Schoenbrun's new upcoming film I Saw the TV Glow seems at least partially inspired by it, at least from what I've seen of the trailer. It is also in 2009 when we see the creation of probably the most iconic creepypasta of all time, Slender Man.
Hey, you hungry home invader! Stop raiding our refrigerator! Yikes!
We've already discussed his origins on Something Awful earlier, but I do want to point out again how reminiscent he is of the much earlier I Found a Digital Camera in the Woods story, and as we discussed, the community quickly latched onto this compelling creation and built out a world around Slender Man, just like it did for the SCP-173 post. A lore, or as they call it, mythos, was created around the character, expanding on the brief snippets written by Victor Surge. He inspired web series like Marble Hornets and video games like Slender the 8 Pages, and spread all over the internet. And here's where I'll once again recommend A Self-Induced Hallucination for more of an in-depth look at the Slender Man craze. As that film covers, Slender Man became so quickly removed from its initial source that it was encountered by many to be a seemingly real urban legend, something that people really believed. This is also detailed very well in the book Slender Man is Coming, Creepypasta and Contemporary Legends on the Internet, which I read for this video. In some cases, users actually made plans to seed seemingly authentic early origins of the Slender Man legend around the internet so that the culture at large would be convinced it was real. This is likely where the fictional Der Grossman legend and photoshops come from, trying to create a false history for the character. Here again, we see the importance of appearing authentic to the creepypasta genre. A new decade starts in 2010, and with it, an explosion in creepypasta's popularity. Many consider this to be the peak of creepypasta's relevance. With the community and infrastructure now in place, it spreads like wildfire. The subreddit r/nosleep was created, a place where users post scary stories entirely in character. The entire subreddit is in character, actually, with specific rules and culture built around not spoiling the fun of believing the stories are true. The About section reads, "No Sleep is a place for Redditors to share their scary personal experiences." One of the subreddit's rules is, "Everything here is true, even if it's not." Some of the most popular and influential creepypasta come out during this wave of popularity. Incredibly ambitious projects like Ben Drown, following in the footsteps of Polybius and Killswitch, which follows a user named Judusable when he discovers a seemingly haunted cartridge of the game Majora's Mask. The story being told via gameplay footage, 4chan posts, websites, and more. A full-fledged ARG, which played out over a full decade. And continuing the video game theming, 2010 also seems to be the year one of the truest playground video game rumors start spreading around, the urban legend of Lavender Town Syndrome, the myth that some copies of Pokemon Red and Blue contain frequencies in the music of the Lavender Town area of the game that cause children to commit. And into the rest of the 2010s, creepypasta continued expanding. Some of my favorite stories appear here, like Abandoned by Disney in 2013, a series of blog posts detailing the writer's supernatural experiences during some urban exploration in the abandoned Mowgli's Palace Resort, a real abandoned Disney resort which once again brings the story ever closer to reality. In 2011, the popular Jeff the Killer creepypasta is created, but as we've come to find out, the origins of both the classic image and the name Jeff the Killer or Killer Jeff have much earlier origins. Something else starts to happen in the 2010s though. As all genres do, once creepypasta became popular, the general quality went down as it was flooded with entries. Some of the most popular stories from this era, Jeff the Killer and Sonic.exe, are renowned for their poor quality of writing. Creepypasta became both ubiquitous and poorly regarded. The community was still there, but it was almost too popular for its own good, at least from my memory. In 2014, the horrifying but thankfully non-fatal Slenderman motivated stabbing brought the term creepypasta into the wider world outside of the internet, and in a pretty terrible light. Then, with the sci-fi TV series Channel Zero based around creepypasta stories in 2016, creepypasta became something that usually kills internet phenomenon. Mainstream. It wasn't gone for good. Stories like Baraska led to successful writing careers, Abandoned by Disney inspired fan games for one of the most popular indie horror games of all time, and SCP has continued going stronger than ever. Still, it didn't feel as relevant a part of internet culture, at least to me, as horror games took so much more of the horror attention span of the internet. And as we moved into the late 2010s, with the release of the third terrible Slenderman film in 2018, Slenderman being the most popular creepypasta ever, there was a consensus that that film was the final nail in the coffin for creepypasta. But I don't think creepypasta ever actually died. They were just changing. By the mid to late 2010s, the majority of internet horror was consumed through YouTube. And in 2017, Chris Straub, influential creepypasta writer and author of Candle Cove, kickstarts the modern analog horror genre with You Are On the Fastest Available Route, the beginning of a series with a familiar name if you've read Candle Cove. Local 58. Meanwhile, the legacy of Polybius and Killswitch and Ben Drown are continued with one of the most influential horror series ever, Petscop, founding the This Game I Found genre proper. Then, a new generation of creators, inspired by these pieces, go on to create their own web series in the analog horror and TGIF genre. Then, in 2019, we get The Backrooms, in the most classic creepypasta fashion it gets, a 4chan post with a shareable short horror story associated with a spooky image. If you're not careful, and you know clip out of reality in the wrong areas, you'll end up in the back rooms, where it's nothing but the stink of old moist carpet, the madness of mono yellow, the endless background noise of fluorescent lights at maximum hum buzz, and approximately 600 million square miles of randomly segmented empty rooms to be trapped in. God save you if you hear something wandering around nearby, because it sure as hell heard you. It's honestly very reminiscent of some of the earliest creepypasta posts on 4chan with existence Easter eggs, which often explain how to break reality. The Backrooms spins out of control and begins connecting with both the analog horror community with Kane Pixel's Backrooms Found Footage series and the many videos that were inspired by that, and a sort of neo-SCP/The Holders with the Backrooms wiki community. And that brings us to where we are today, the 2020s. The genres of The Game I Found and analog horror continue to evolve their own tropes and communities, becoming more popular than ever. Combinations of both these genres lead us to digital horror, which is a genre that harkens back to the nostalgia of the very era that creepypastas came from, the 2000s and 2010s. And this is the most important point I want to make here. I don't think creepypasta ever really went away. I think all of the modern internet horror genres and formats can trace their roots back to creepypasta, whether that be tropes or specific stories. Going through the history for this video, I couldn't help but notice the web of inspirations, origins, and evolutions. I felt like I was a detective connecting red string on a cork. Let me just show you. I told you this guy would come in handy. To start, the SCP-173 post on 4chan goes on to inspire the SCP Wiki, which then goes on to inspire the Backrooms Wiki. Speaking of the Backrooms, as I mentioned, the Backrooms concept comes in the form of a classic 4chan creepypasta. What about analog horror? Well, of course, I don't want to oversimplify the origins of the genre. Obviously, there are a multitude of influences, but it really starts with Chris Straub's Local 58. He himself an influential creepypasta author, and the name of the series is literally a reference to Candle Cove. Other well-known inspirations for analog horror series like The Walton Files come from Marble Hornets. Where does Marble Hornets come from? Oh, I don't know, the most popular creepypasta of all time, Slenderman? Boom, another connection. While we're here, analog horror of course gave us the Backrooms Found Footage, so another connection there. Don't think I forgot Petscop. I'd say you could trace Petscop's origins all the way back to Polybius, which is a pre-creepypasta urban legend. They both even have the element of a mysterious company name with Sinislosion and Garalina. But most directly, Ben Drown comes to mind for Petscop's predecessors. And I would posit a mix of This Game I Found and analog horror's influences combine to create what we now call digital horror. And that's what this whole series is all about. Like Morley Grove, for instance. Not only is it a direct reimagining of a creepypasta, but Remy Abode is also behind Gemini Home Entertainment, an analog horror series directly inspired by Local 58. I think no matter how you slice it, most pieces of internet horror can trace their roots in some way back to creepypasta. Whether that be direct inspiration or converging in parallel interests, cultures, and niches just reinventing the same thing. And it's not just the series we've covered here. These reinventions of creepypasta are popping up more and more, like the series Speed Duo 64 by Shut Up JoJo, which feels like an almost ground-up rework of the Sonic.exe story. I haven't had a chance to get through all of it, but the video Hallway.mp4 has some great moments. Or the channel Vibing Leaf, which is doing incredibly high-effort retakes on classic creepypasta like Jeff the Killer, Smile Dog, Ben Drown, Eyeless Jack, Mario Victim 1, and more. And it's not just retakes either. Vibing Leaf also has original stories and shorts that clearly have a ton of talent behind them and feel like they take a lot of inspiration from the creepypasta genre. Personally, I really like their interpretation of Windows XP Horror Edition, but that may be because I just love Windows XP in general. The point is, creepypasta aren't just an antiquated horror fad. They're still all around us. And now, with this more comprehensive history of the term, I think we can actually start to pick out the common threads to define it. I would not be the first to point out that creepypasta function essentially as an evolution of traditional urban legends, ghost stories, and folk tales. That's the entire focus of that book I mentioned, Slender Man is Coming, Creepypasta and Contemporary Legends on the Internet. It's a series of essays exploring the concept of Slender Man and creepypasta as a whole through the lens of folklore. We're not going to be getting quite as academic in this video, but to help with our definition, I want to point out some of the similarities between internet creepypasta and traditional urban legends, with examples from the book, my own thoughts, and from bits of another essay, The Horror of a Networked Existence, Affect, Connection, and Anxiety in Classic Creepypasta Narratives by Sarah Bimo from the book Global Perspectives on Digital Literature, A Critical Introduction for the 21st Century. The first connection you could make comes all the way back to creepypasta's origins in chain letters, and then later copypasta, how these stories shift and change as they are told and then retold. As Blank and McNeil explain right in the introduction, while referring to creepypasta's evolution from copypasta, the narrative texts often undergo modification, annotation, and/or reinterpretation by new posters in a folkloric process of repetition and variation. Creepypasta is, in short, creepy copypasta. The natural process of changes and additions in folklore as they are orally passed from storyteller to audience member, who then becomes a storyteller themselves, traditionally around campfires or suburban bedrooms past midnight at sleepovers, is replicated in the digital world as posters make their own changes, appropriate pre-existing texts, or simple typos and variations are passed along as they are reposted. The sharing of the story creates a dynamic and evolving element to the story. The next point of comparison relates a lot to this dynamic element. The book calls attention to the concept of legend tripping, the term given to the phenomenon of young people interacting with local urban legends via visiting the sites where they supposedly happened. An example might be staying overnight in a supposedly haunted abandoned building, or walking through a tunnel where some kind of cryptid is alleged to live. This is an example of what folklorists call ostension, where the experience of the legend is extended beyond just the verbal storytelling, and individuals attempt to experience it firsthand. And many creepypastas have both the opportunity for and direct examples of people interacting with them via legend tripping. One of the most direct examples that comes to mind is the Herobrine creepypasta. It's a story I haven't mentioned yet, but I'm sure many of you have heard. And again, its origins appear in the most classic creepypasta fashion, a post almost reminiscent of the digital camera in the woods, a single screenshot of the game Minecraft with a barely visible figure concealed in the fog, with a brief bit of text claiming the poster has some kind of entity within their Minecraft world. The story, though indirectly, almost compels the reader to boot up their own world and look for this entity in the fog for themselves, experiencing the story for themselves in the virtual place where it occurred. But this legend tripping element becomes even more explicit when you take into account the addition and spread of instructions for how to summon Herobrine into your own world, and other instances of creepypasta creepypasta legend tripping have already come up, with existence Easter eggs also being a literal set of instructions which oftentimes the reader can complete entirely while sitting at their computer right after reading the story. And this is one of the elements that is so unique to creepypasta as a digital form of folklore. Traditional urban legends are told around campfires in the woods, and part of the fear often comes from their environment as it connects to the story. A story about a killer in the woods feels all the scarier and more real when you're faced with a darkened forest around you. Though not true universally, creepypasta narratives often engage with a digital element, and we see this going as far back as their origins in chainmail. Whether it be Carmen Widstead's ghost spreading via email, or the smile.jpg image appearing on message boards, or entities hiding in the code of a haunted video game, in this way, the internet and cyberspace become the digital woods in which the killer is hiding. The physical element of ostension is no longer physical, instead a digital one. There's one last major point of contention as to whether creepypasta can truly be considered folklore or not, and it comes down to what is actually the final piece of the puzzle for our definition of creepypasta: reality. In discussing Slender Man's classification as a legend, Blank and McNeil say, many folklorists recognize online narratives about Slender Man fall into the broad category of legends, narratives told as true or possibly true, set in the real world and in historical time. And with so much of the emphasis I've placed on creepypasta being written as if they were real, this seems pretty open and shut. However, they go on to say, legends by definition deal largely with belief and possibility, but the idea of a crowdsourced mythos speaks to a distinct awareness of fabrication. Slender Man is a new kind of creation, one intentionally created as a fiction, but one that has emulated the look and feel of legend so well that its emic categorization is understandably multivalent. Starting to really see just how pertinent We're All Going to the World's Fair was. While an urban legend doesn't require everyone who hears it to believe it, what sets some creepypasta apart is their explicit existence as fiction. Though some creepypasta have succeeded in completely blurring the lines for a time, like Ted the Caver or Kisaragi Station, many creepypasta are unambiguously fiction. Ben Drown, Abandoned by Disney, Candle Cove. We know their authors, and their plots are decidedly not real. Still, I'd argue that a defining factor of creepypasta is the way in which they mimic folklore, in all the ways we've discussed. The term folkloresque is brought up multiple times in Slender Man is Coming, and it feels especially apt. And one of the most important ways creepypasta draws on folklore, I'd argue, is that the stories are told as true, authentic. They deny their fiction. Petscop would be a great contemporary example. Though after it finished its run, the creator revealed himself, and we now know a decent bit about how it was made, the story itself and the entire channel it is hosted on is still presented as entirely real. And even with situations like this, where its fiction is at some point confirmed, many series, including Petscop, can still end up blurring this line. A common in-joke in the web series and ARG community is the phrase, "Is this an ARG?" referencing comments left on series as they're just starting, with commenters seemingly unable to discern the status as either fiction or reality. Moreover, the format of presenting these stories as entirely real are also incredibly important to their ability to scare us as the audience. It's a point that is brought up in Sarah Bimo's essay, The Horror of a Networked Existence, using smile.jpg's final image reveal as an example. However the reader might feel about the content of the image, the moment of effect generated upon the intrusion of a fictional narrative element into the world of the real is genuinely disturbing and brings about the momentary sensation that the reader is actually at risk from the horrific events described in the narrative. In this moment of boundary crossing, readers effectively experience the horror of the story and are subsumed within the purview of the diegesis. This sense of real risk is enabled by the particular affordances of the medium of digital communication, which is deployed both diegetically and extradiegetically. It is both the subject of and the vehicle of the story. It's that real danger imposed on the audience that makes creepypasta so unique. It pulls the participants into the narrative, no longer passive readers but instead actors in the story. It removes the barrier between us and the horrors in the story, both by telling the story as real and many times by employing the digital medium you are actively reading from as a part of the danger, as is mentioned in Bimo's essay, and as we've discussed urban legends do via the physical world. And it's clear this element of reality is very important, as it's been been preserved throughout the genre's evolution. We've seen it as we went through the history of the genre, and BMO also brings it up in the essay too. While early creepypasta naturally anonymized themselves, removing themselves from the source, and therefore any confirmation of non-reality, mostly by circumstance, being shared and copied around anonymous message boards, even after the infrastructure evolved, cultural rules were set in place to maintain the folklore-esque elements of the perceived reality. r/no sleep is a great example, which, as we previously discussed, bakes the true story element into their rules. Even with the stories published directly by their authors like Candle Cove, the writing still takes the form of found forum posts, an attempt to convey authenticity to the reader in the same way a found footage film would. And I suppose that is the final point in the discussion, that their portrayal as a true story is a defining feature. I think, finally, we can try to actually define creepypasta. How long's it been? An hour? 2? Well, here goes anyway. A creepypasta is a piece of horror fiction primarily hosted or created on the internet, which presents itself as an authentic piece of the medium it belongs to, in which it takes place in the same real world as the audience and appears to believe in or implore the reader to believe in its reality. Or more simply, a piece of horror unfiction primarily hosted on the internet. I'm willing to accept that this is not perfect, and I would love to hear some people's challenges or changes they might make to make it a more accurate description. But at the very least, I think this is a clear description of whether a piece of media could be considered a creepypasta, but maybe doesn't quite cover the larger trends or characters. Under this definition, you could call Marble Hornets a creepypasta, but Slender Man isn't one piece of media, it's an idea. So we've reached the limits of my definition there. I also want to point out that I don't think being hosted on a fiction site necessarily disqualifies something from being a creepypasta. For instance, Candle Cove might be hosted on its author's website, giving you an idea that this is something he wrote, but the actual text of the story itself is presented as a series of forum discussions and does not betray an impossible point of view like an omnipotent narrator. What I like most about this definition is how much it opens up the term creepypasta. It's no longer a relic of the past. Instead, it can be applied to the modern media which takes so much inspiration from its origins. Petscop is a creepypasta, much of the analog horror genre, digital horror, and more. It's not to say that they're all that way. For instance, many pieces of internet horror aren't presenting themselves as entirely real, and I think you can still be inspired by creepypasta without actually being one. But for me, I'm happy with this definition, at least as of now.
Well, as seems usual at this point, looks like I don't have much time left before things corrupt completely. Thank you all for watching. Go check out everything I've talked about. All the series and channels are great. Oh, and I have a pretty comprehensive sources doc in the description. Support me on Patreon for extra goodies, and it does help me out a lot, as little as $2. The music for this video is available on Spotify, along with an album of all my digital horror music, royalty-free, on Bandcamp and Patreon. I hope you've all enjoyed, and I'll see you all next time.